Chapter 999. Ruler. The Eastern Zhou patriarch cried out loud. He didn't dare to hesitate at all. The aura within his body erupted like a volcano. Images of mountains and rivers appeared from the void, wrapping around him. It made the Eastern Zhou patriarch seem like the ruler of this vast world. But in the next moment, the illusory world suddenly trembled, and then a terrifying crack silently appeared on it. From one end to the other, it passed through the entire world phantom. It carried with it a cold and ruthless will that couldn't be resisted, splitting it in half. From between the Eastern Zhou patriarch's eyebrows, there was a loud popping sound. Blood instantly flowed out and fell into his eyes, causing them to turn crimson red. Then, his entire face was drenched in blood, making him look extremely distressed. The Eastern Zhou patriarch was infinitely close to having the strongest cultivation below the ruler level. His mortal body was incomparably lively. Let alone a single wound, even if his entire body was cut in half, it would immediately regenerate. Even if most of his body was destroyed to ashes, he would be able to quickly regenerate and restore his mortal body. But this wound between his eyebrows was different. Even with his cultivation, he couldn't repair it. Because of the shock in his heart, the Eastern Zhou patriarch blurted out the identity of this phantom that appeared within the black jade altar in the sea of stars. Ruler. These two simple words seemed to carry a heavy weight that fell into everyone's hearts, causing them to subconsciously hold their breaths. Even their heartbeats seemed to stop because of this. The world was vast and boundless. There were tens of thousands of worlds scattered in all directions. There were trillions upon trillions of living beings that together formed this boundless world. Of all these cultivators that stepped onto the road of cultivation and constantly transformed themselves, climbing to the peak of the great Tao, only those that reached the peak had the qualifications to be called rulers. What was a ruler? To put it simply, it was to control a part of the world, to be the faith of trillions of living beings. With a single thought, the world would change color. With a single killing intent, rivers of blood would flow, raising a hand to overturn yin and yang, and with a single step to destroy the world. This was a ruler. This was an existence that surpassed holy lands. This was an existence that could truly use the tens of thousands of worlds as a chessboard. This was an unsurpassed existence that could compete for supremacy between the heavens and earth. Compared to this, the insignificant Eastern Zhou family was nothing more than an ant beneath the foot of a giant. Although they were relatively stronger, a single finger could crush them into powder. This was a disparity in strength that surpassed the limits of what words could describe. The hall was deathly silent as the bodies of everyone stiffened like iron. Their foreheads and backs were covered in sweat while terror assaulted their minds like a tide. A sovereign. It was a sovereign. Even though the rumors had mentioned that Qin Yu had a teacher whose strength reached the heavens, no one would consider him as a ruler. It was because this was already not only reaching the heavens, but also standing above the heavens, overlooking the myriad of worlds. In other words, when Qin Yu expressed his opinion before, he had been very modest. It was just that they hadn't been able to understand it. But now, what they wanted to say was, since you have such a background, why are you being so modest and asking us to court death? If we were to be more direct, we wouldn't dare to do that even if we were to reveal a little bit of information. Ruler, that was a supreme ruler. Perhaps because of today's seemingly insignificant matter, the entire Eastern Zhou clan was about to be annihilated. This was because the sovereign's dignity did not allow for the slightest provocation. This was the cruelty of the world. Everyone had to pay the corresponding price for the mistakes they made. Eastern Zhou's Jia Li was one of those shocked. She could still hear the patriarch's words echoing in her ears. Sovereign. Sovereign, with the patriarch's cultivation, he certainly wouldn't make a mistake in his judgment. In other words, because of the Eastern Zhou clan's actions today, they had alarmed some terrifying existence that reigned above the myriad of worlds. She had opened her eyes. Without doing anything, she had already severely wounded the patriarch. If she really did do something, perhaps all she had to do was wave her hand, and everyone in this hall would be annihilated in body and soul. Then, the entire Eastern Zhou clan would become an existence that existed only in name. They were destined to be completely destroyed and divided up. No wonder Qin Yu said that because of certain reasons, he couldn't reveal his teacher's identity before obtaining permission. Regarding this, Eastern Zhou's Jia Li had once heard that because of his sovereign status, he was involved in the great karma of the world. Once one became his disciple, they would naturally become a part of this karma. But as mentioned before, this karma was far too great. If one didn't have enough strength and rashly entered it, they would only be harmed instead. Their lucky chances in life would be reduced, and they might even die. Thus, every sovereign's disciple had to undergo numerous tests. Only after obtaining permission could they be officially recognized. So, Qin Yu had already vaguely given her a reminder. But how could she possibly think that this matter came from the sovereign level? Moreover, before this, she had only vaguely heard some information from the high-level figures of the Eastern Zhou clan. She didn't dare to confirm it herself. But speaking of this now was clearly too late. The sovereign had already been alarmed. The survival of the Eastern Zhou clan could be decided with a single thought. If there really was a medicine for regret in this world, Eastern Zhou's Jia Li believed that everyone present would want to buy a jar and crazily eat it. Everything was fine, so why did they have to seek death? Eastern Zhou's Jia Li bitterly smiled. Regarding all of this, there was nothing she could do. Speaking of medicine for regret, the one who felt the most regret right now was the Eastern Zhou clan leader, a super powerhouse who had lived for countless years. That's right, this super powerhouse lived up to his name. There was absolutely no deliberate mockery or anything like that. However, there was still an enormous gap between the levels of super powerhouses. For example, he was only a hair's breadth away from the strongest below the ruler level. Although it was only a hair's breadth away, the most he could do was exchange a few blows with such an existence before fleeing. But facing a sovereign, it was like the distance between the starry skies and hell. Let alone exchanging a few moves, just a serious look could kill him. This wasn't an exaggeration, because once one reached the sovereign level, they had already surpassed the limits of what the mortal world could see. They had merged with the heavens and earth. Or, to be more precise, they had become a part of the heavens and earth. They could pluck stars with a wave of their hand. Zhou Bai had done this time and time again. He had been prepared to give up, but he had insisted on continuing, leading to this current situation. If this led to the destruction of the Eastern Zhou clan, he would be the center of the entire clan. But who could have known that he had his own reasons for doing this? Because when Zhou Bai peeked into Qin Yu's aura and the altar shook, he felt a strange aura. It was extremely thin, but it caused the Eastern Zhou clan leader's heart to violently beat, as if his entire body would burn up. Although he didn't know where this aura came from, there was one thing he was certain of. It was the breakthrough turning point that the Eastern Zhou clan leader had been waiting for countless years. As long as he could obtain a part of this aura, he was confident he could take another step forward and step into the strongest level beneath the sovereign level. At that time, the entire Eastern Zhou clan would undergo earth-shaking changes because of this. Their strength would rise by over 100 times. Everything I do is for myself, but at the same time, it is also for the entire clan. But, just like Eastern Zhou's Jia Li, thinking about this now was meaningless. The Eastern Zhou clan leader's thoughts raced. Suddenly, he grasped a ray of light in the dark night of despair. With the sovereign strength, since she had been alarmed and opened her noble eyes, then she only needed a single glance to kill him. Compared to that, the space between his eyebrows had been ruptured and his soul had been violently shaken. This couldn't be considered much of an injury at all. What did this mean? Although he couldn't be sure, the Eastern Zhou clan leader couldn't let go of this slim chance. He prostrated himself on the ground, displaying his most respectful attitude. Respected and unsurpassed great sovereign, the Eastern Zhou clan has enraged your will because of our ignorance. We are willing to offer you a sufficient price to appease your anger. I hope that the great sovereign can forgive our ignorance. Within the starry sea, ink, jade, altar, The phantom that had appeared had been silent ever since she opened her eyes. After hearing this, she didn't say anything. Just like when she first appeared, she vanished without a trace. The terrifying pressure that filled the hall, covering everything, vanished along with it, as if everything that happened just now had been an illusion. Who? Within the hall, all of the Eastern Zhou clan leaders let out a collective breath. Their breaths superimposed upon each other, forming a shock wave of air. Perhaps one person would hallucinate during the day, but for dozens of them, this was clearly impossible. The Eastern Zhou clan leader stood up from the ground. He lifted his hand and wiped away the blood on his face. The wound between his eyebrows had barely healed, but there was still a red line that remained, like a temporarily closed third eye. Rumble, rumble. The entire altar completely shattered and collapsed. The starry sea ink jade that was known as incomparably hard was crushed into endless powder as it tumbled about. This was because there was nothing in this world that could withstand the terrifying attack of a sovereign's aura when he descended. To touch, it was certain to be destroyed. Zhou Bai had already fainted. He lay on the ground, gasping for air. But since he hadn't died, the Eastern Zhou clan's methods would definitely allow him to live. Take Mr. Zhou away and treat him as best as you can. The Eastern Zhou clan leader looked up, his eyes sweeping around. What happened today is the greatest secret of my Eastern Zhou clan. No one can reveal even half a word. Otherwise, I swear on my family's bloodline that I will strip you of your bloodline status and beat you to the ground, never to rise again. Their hearts chilled. All the elders stood up and bowed. Yes, clan leader. No one doubted the truth of the Eastern Zhou clan leader's words, because this matter involved a sovereign existence. Sovereign, this was a sovereign. If they were lucky enough to draw closer to him, that would be an incomparably great help to the entire Eastern Zhou clan. If this matter were to be known by the outside world, they would do everything they could to curry favor with Qin Yu and replace the Eastern Zhou clan's current position. Before this, the Eastern Zhou clan leader had ordered that Zhou Bai be taken away for treatment. This was a form of house arrest. Thinking about it, this Grandmaster Zhou wouldn't appear in front of the world again for a long time. I will be going into seclusion to cultivate. During this time, all matters of the clan will be decided by the Council of Elders. But there is one point. When it comes to Qin Yu, the will of the Eastern Zhou clan leader will prevail. No one is allowed to interfere. The Eastern Zhou clan leader looked over. This is your lucky chance, but it is also an opportunity for the clan. I hope that you will grasp it and not disappoint me. His words were filled with deep meaning. Eastern Zhou clan leader Zhu Li respectfully bowed. I will follow the clan leader's orders. I wish the clan leader all the best. I hope that you will gain some benefits from your seclusion and make a breakthrough soon. The Eastern Zhou clan leader smiled. You are very good. He turned and stepped out, vanishing from sight. After facing the sovereign head-on and being injured by his aura, the Eastern Zhou clan leader had actually profited from this disaster and grasped a chance. With this, he might really be able to obtain some harvests and take another step forward in his cultivation. It was because of this that the Eastern Zhou clan leader decided to put down Qin Yu and leave everything to the Council of Elders, choosing to immediately go into seclusion. A cultivation opportunity was like a flower in the mirror or a moon in the water. It was right in front of him at this moment, but in the next moment it might disappear forever. He had waited for countless years and finally grasped this opportunity. How could he allow it to run away from him like this? Eastern Zhou clan leader Zhu Li stood up, a trace of excitement in her eyes. She had guessed right. If she could leave a good impression on the clan leader today, then in the future she would be able to greatly increase her score. Of course, the most important point was that she and Qin Yu were old acquaintances. In the eyes of the clan leader, this was the most important matter. Thus, he gave her the highest authority to negotiate with Qin Yu. Looking at the faces of the elders, one could see just how envious this was. Eastern Zhou clan leader Zhu Li bowed and said, "In the future, I ask the elders to make things more convenient for me." She glanced over at Eastern Zhou clan leader Bu Hu's gloomy complexion and felt a burst of joy in her heart. This old ghost probably never thought that things would develop to this step. The matter of Qin Yu becoming her follower had been settled. This helped her understand that he was an incomparably powerful support. Disciple of a ruler. Just this name alone was enough to intimidate all parties. When she faced other competitors within her family, she would have an absolute advantage. But the premise for all of this was that she could thoroughly tie her own interests together with Qin Yu, becoming an inseparable whole. If a woman wanted to become an inseparable body of interests, the simplest method was to become Dao companions. Eastern Zhou clan leader Zhu Li subconsciously recalled that old man Yi had once mentioned this matter. Her face flushed red, and she quickly suppressed her thoughts. In the courtyard where Qin Yu was, everything was calm and tranquil. His tense body relaxed. So much time had passed, and there was still no movement from the Eastern Zhou clan. It seemed that no one had discovered the matter of the jade pendant egg. If so, then the worst result would be that the Eastern Zhou clan wouldn't allow him to become Eastern Zhou clan leader Zhu Li's follower. That way, there wouldn't be any danger. But if he was really rejected by the Eastern Zhou clan, how would he enter the myriad souls Dao? Qin Yu's relaxed eyebrows furrowed together once more. Thoughts raced through his mind. At this time, there was a knock on the courtyard door. Xiang Shui went out to open it. A moment later, she returned with a strange expression. She placed a pitch-black ring in front of Qin Yu. Although it seemed ordinary, it was absolutely precious. This is a gift from the Eastern Zhou clan to you. They only say that it is a reward for you to become Eastern Zhou clan leader Zhu Li's follower. Speaking to hear, Xiang Shui subconsciously gulped, and her voice unconsciously lowered. There aren't any spells on the ring. I just took a look. There seems to be a bit too many things inside. In fact, the so-called reward from the Eastern Zhou clan was not only astonishingly high in quantity, but the quality was even more astonishing. This was no longer something that could be described as a simple reward. The reason the Eastern Zhou clan did this was clearly because they hoped that Qin Yu could understand their sincere apology through the thickness of the gift. Qin Yu put down the ring, a strange expression on his face. He subconsciously rubbed his chin, wondering how he had passed this test. Moreover, looking at the current situation, it seemed that even the Eastern Zhou clan was frightened by his background. Otherwise, why would they not hesitate to send him a mountain of treasures as a reward? As Qin Yu was puzzled, he suddenly felt something was wrong. He looked up and saw Xiang Shui staring at him with wide eyes. She was looking at him with a serious expression. "What are you doing?" Xiang Shui earnestly said. "I want to see just how many secrets are hidden beneath that face of yours." She clicked her tongue several times. "I already know what the God Coiling Gorge is. I also know just how sensational what you did was. I originally thought that you were hiding your depths, but compared to what you're doing now, what is the God Coiling Gorge?" The dignified Eastern Zhou clan controls 100 worlds and is said to be a giant-level influence with hundreds of original gods under their command. Now, they are actually apologizing to you. Although they are a bit vague, none of this is important. What is important is that they actually lowered their heads. Xiang Shui took a deep breath and stared at Qin Yu. "Can you tell me just how deep you are hiding yourself? How many secrets do you have that I don't know about? For instance, do you really have a teacher that reaches the heavens?" Qin Yu bitterly smiled. "What are you blabbering on about? My mind is still in a mess, so please don't disturb me." "A teacher that reaches the heavens? Haha, if he really had such a background, why would he need to live such a difficult life? He would have brought out this backer long ago and gone to the peach blossom spring to ask the woman who planted the peach to let Ningling go. If he thought about it like this, having a teacher that reaches the heavens really was a very good thing. Unfortunately, he didn't have one. So, after thinking about it for a while, he went back to doing what he needed to do." Qin Yu rubbed his eyebrows. He glanced at the ring on the table and roughly sorted out the situation he was facing. It was clear that the resistance he was worried about from the Eastern Zhou clan had been resolved for some unknown reason. In other words, the matter of him becoming Eastern Zhou's follower had finally been confirmed. This was the most important thing. Qin Yu smiled. As long as he could enter the myriad souls Dao, he would naturally have a chance to understand its essence and find a way to break it. No matter what, no matter how difficult it was, he had to rescue Ning Ling from this predestined fate. However, before a follower entered the Myriad Souls Tao, they would have to sign some sort of contract. Only after obtaining permission would they be able to act on their own. Perhaps before entering, he should speak with Eastern Zhou's Jia Li and have her agree so that he could obtain the qualifications to act freely as soon as possible. But soon, Qin Yu discovered that all of his worries weren't a problem at all. This was because the Eastern Zhou clan's attitude towards him had undergone a tremendous change. Disciple of a sovereign with such an identity, if he was willing to become a follower of Eastern Zhou's Jia Li, that was the entire Eastern Zhou clan's honor. You want him to abide by an ordinary follower contract? What kind of joke is this? Our Eastern Zhou clan would never do such an unreliable thing. Not only did the contract have to be modified, but it had to be greatly altered. It had to be based on Qin Yu's will until he was satisfied. So, when Eastern Zhou's Jia Li came a second time and brought the contract that Qin Yu needed to sign to become a follower, he subconsciously frowned as he probed it with his divine sense. After several breaths of time, he looked up and asked, "Miss Eastern Zhou, are you sure this is the contract I need to sign?" Eastern Zhou's Jia Li's heart chilled. She slowly said, "Qin Yu, if there is anything you are not satisfied with, you can speak up and I will do my best to adjust it for you." Qin Yu glanced at an Eastern Zhou clan elder sitting on the other side. This person was all smiles. "That's right. Fellow Taoist Qin Yu, please feel free to speak. My Eastern Zhou clan will definitely satisfy all of your requests." This attitude, it was simply too good. Qin Yu secretly thought to himself, could it be that the Eastern Zhou clan's investigation had deviated and landed on some fierce character? Otherwise, how could they be so scared? But no matter what the reason was, this was at least a good thing for him. The contract in the Jade Slip, TSK, he really didn't know how to describe it. If an ignorant cultivator were to look at it, he feared they wouldn't be able to tell who was the follower between Qin Yu and Eastern Zhou's Jia Li. He lifted his hand and placed a trace of his divine sense on the Jade Slip. The surface of the Jade Slip flashed, indicating that the contract had been signed. Eastern Zhou's Jia Li was overjoyed. She stood up and earnestly bowed. "Qin Yu, thank you for being willing to become my follower. After entering the Myriad Souls Tao, I will leave everything to you." Chapter 1000. News that Qin Yu had become Eastern Zhou Jia Li's follower spread out as quickly as possible through various channels. As the only cultivator since ancient times to leave the God-confining gorge with his own strength, and with the Myriad Soul Tao about to open, he naturally attracted more attention. The surface was calm, but that was only on the surface. Hidden waves were already surging, waiting for the right opportunity to erupt. After all, if they could obtain Qin Yu's approval and pull him to their side, their chances of success would greatly increase after entering the Myriad Soul Tao. Just this point alone was enough to take a risk and form a relationship with the Eastern Zhou family. It was just that after they obtained this news, they were puzzled. The Eastern Zhou family had always been cautious, so why were they so decisive? Qin Yu's identity and origins were only rumors. No one knew just what was going on. Or could it be said that they already knew Qin Yu's true background? No matter what, the Eastern Zhou family's actions were a clear signal. Qin Yu could be used. The contract was signed because the Eastern Zhou family was a step ahead. As long as Qin Yu hadn't entered the Myriad Soul Tao and was willing to pay a price, the contract could be torn up. The struggle had yet to end. Eastern Zhou Jia Li replaced all the servants Qin Yu could contact with absolute confidence of the Eastern Zhou family. She also strictly ordered that no one was allowed to contact Qin Yu without permission. Of course, all of this was done in secret so that he wouldn't be discovered. The reason for this was to avoid the possibility of Qin Yu being roped in by others. After all, in this world, there were no absolutes. As long as the dust hadn't settled, anything was possible. Eastern Zhou Jia Li believed in Qin Yu, but she didn't want any new waves to appear. After carefully inspecting the area several times and making sure that the outside world was isolated to the greatest extent possible from contacting Chinyu, Eastern Joe Jolly made some preparations and invited the 5 followers to gather. The myriad soul Tao was about to open, and they needed to familiarize themselves with each other. At the very least, they needed to know each other's strengths and what they were good at. Only like this could they display their greatest strength as a group. Because they didn't want others to discover them, the Eastern Zhou family paid extra attention to Chinyu. Besides signing a different contract, he enjoyed the same treatment as the other followers. Eastern Zhou Jolly stood at the entrance to the courtyard. She nodded at Chinyu, who was walking behind a servant. "You're the only one left." Chinyu nodded. "I was cultivating just now, so I was a bit delayed. I apologize." Dongzhou Chali smiled. "Just in time. Let's go in." She turned around and led the way. The servant stood to the side. What happened next was not something he was qualified to participate in. Schwa. In the quiet garden, several pairs of eyes under the octagonal pavilion looked over at the same time. Their gazes were filled with a sense of scrutiny. East Zhou Chali said, "Everyone, this is fellow Taoist Chinyu." Because his cultivation was interrupted, he arrived a bit late. She explained. She naturally didn't want any disharmonious elements to appear in the group. "It's fine, we just arrived as well." Shang Lingyue was the first to speak with a smile. Chinyu nodded towards him. He cupped his hands together and said, "Greetings, fellow Taoists." Everyone returned the gesture. What followed was a simple introduction of their identities. Apart from Chinyu and Shang Lingyue, the remaining 3 people were a man and 2 women. They didn't look too old. Of course, for successful cultivators, appearance was of no value at all. At the very least, in Chinyu's opinion, the one closer to him, the one with a delicate appearance and a pure and innocent look in her eyes, was definitely pretending to be young. The aura of time made one feel as if one would choke their throat. It could be said that out of all the cultivators Chinyu had ever seen, she was the one who had lived the longest. Of course, in normal circumstances, the longer a person lived, the more formidable they would be. The man had a gentle expression and a calm expression. His name was Xiachan. The woman who was pretending to be young also had a tender name, just like a fairy. The last woman should be a woman because although she didn't have an Adam's apple, her chest was a bit too flat. Just like her name, she was Taoist Priestess Taiping. That's right, she was a Taoist woman who wore Taoist robes, surnamed Yellow, and held a horsetail whisk in her hands. Of course, this wasn't just external appearances. If they could obtain the approval of the Dongzhou family clan and become one of East Zhou Chali's followers, then their strength couldn't be underestimated. After exchanging a few simple words, they could be considered to have gotten to know each other. Because they had all confirmed that they would become East Zhou Chali's followers, they would have to work together to overcome the various dangers of the myriad soul Tao. After letting down their guard, the interaction between them went smoothly. East Zhou Chali said, "The 5 of you will follow me into the myriad soul Tao to compete for the lucky chances of the inheritance. It would be best if you can describe your strength so that we can prepare ahead of time." Her eyes swept over everyone. After a brief pause, she said, "My cultivation is at the 7th level of the divine realm, and I have my family's secret techniques and trump cards. For a short period of time, I can barely contend with a peak divine realm martial artist. In addition, I have some life-saving treasures on me. I will make a list of them so that everyone knows what they are." Before they came here, everyone already knew what they were here for, so they naturally made their own preparations. Not long after East Zhou Chali finished speaking, Shang Lingyue smiled and said, "My cultivation is at the 5th level of the divine realm, and I study the Peach Blossom Springs cultivation method. If I fight with my full strength, I can fight a peak divine realm martial artist. In addition, I have done some research into spells and array formations." Xia Chun, Wan Ruoxian, and Taoist nun Taiping introduced themselves one after another. Among them, Wan Ruoxian, who was the youngest and the oldest, turned out to be a beast-taming cultivator who seemed to have a powerful beast as a subordinate. Then it was Qin Yu's turn. He paused for a moment and said, Chinyu hasn't entered the divine realm yet. If he fights with his full strength, he might be able to fight a peak divine realm martial artist. Besides that, his mortal body is stronger and he is more sensitive to the fluctuations of the world's rules. In the garden, beneath the exquisite octagonal pavilion, there was a sudden silence. Everyone subconsciously widened their eyes. As they looked at Chinyu, they revealed a trace of shock. This shock came from two aspects. You are so strong, and yet you aren't at the divine realm. If you break through in the future, wouldn't your strength rise by another level? In comparison, the first point was shocking and enviable. But in today's situation, the second point was more important. You aren't even at the divine realm, so what qualifications do you have to enter the myriad soul Tao? East Zhou Jilly took a deep breath. She suddenly felt as if she had overlooked something. Chinyu, you haven't entered the divine realm? Chinyu nodded. Her heart sank, and she bitterly smiled. It's true, it's actually true. But you are so strong that you created the God-confining gorge with your own strength. You are an existence that even Shang Lingwei doesn't dare to provoke, but you haven't even broken through to the divine realm. If you didn't say it, who would have thought? We all thought that your aura-concealing abilities were so strong that you deliberately concealed your cultivation. This time, we're in big trouble. East Zhou Jelly looked at Chinyu, her bitter smile deepening. Chinyu, I'm afraid you can't enter the myriad soul Tao with us. Chinyu frowned, his eyes flashing. Is there a cultivation limit to entering the myriad soul Tao? Shang Lingwei looked deeply at him. The condition to enter the myriad soul Tao is that you must be above the divine realm and below the original divinity realm. There was a trace of doubt in his eyes. With Chinyu's status, he should know this. But it was obvious that Chinyu hadn't heard of this before. This was really strange. East Zhou Jelly's heart was even more bitter. She thought that she was confident of entering the myriad soul Tao, but she didn't expect things to be like this. Chinyu isn't at the divine realm. Could it be that he wants to walk that path? But even if he wants to walk that path, it shouldn't be like this. Chinyu thought for a moment, then said slowly, if that's the case, I will break through to the divine realm before the myriad soul Tao opens. With his current accumulation, it would be easy for him to knock open the Heaven-Earth Dragon Gate and condense the God Spirit Mark. But obviously, others didn't think so. As his voice fell, the surrounding people looked at him with even more strange eyes. Break through to the divine realm? Originally, with Chinyu's talent, it would be easy for him to do this. They wouldn't doubt it at all. But now, you have accumulated too much before you reach the divine realm. Sometimes, accumulating too much might not be a good thing, especially for cultivators who haven't broken through to the divine realm. Chapter 1001. Cultivators who had yet to enter the immortal realm could comprehend the principles of heaven and earth and the power of the principles. Then, they could open the great path and condense the God Seal to reach the immortal realm. Strictly speaking, each complete principle represented a path to the immortal realm. Obtaining one could prove the immortal realm. Their life level would undergo a transformation, and their strength would rise, granting them a long lifespan. Being able to comprehend 3 or more principles was considered not bad. If one could comprehend 5 or more, they would be considered a genius in the eyes of the world. Of course, the comprehension mentioned here was complete, without the slightest bit of incomplete mastery. Because of the limitation of the soul and cultivation base, comprehending principles before entering the immortal realm was indeed a very difficult task. The world recognized that a cultivator who could control 7 principles before entering the immortal realm had a chance of becoming an original god. Although the Eastern Zhou family could easily gather hundreds of original God Realm cultivators, they were scattered in dozens of worlds, big and small. In each world, the number of original God Realm cultivators could be counted on one hand. They were already terrifying existences that sat above the 9 heavens. Of course, in this boundless world, there were countless changes. There were always some things that were out of the ordinary. For example, some cultivators were born with amazing soul sensitivity, or they had an extraordinary ability to comprehend the principles of heaven and earth. They could even borrow external forces to comprehend more of the principles of heaven and earth before entering the immortal realm. In this case, they would try to comprehend as many principles of heaven and earth before entering the immortal realm. The reason was simple. The deeper the accumulation before entering the immortal realm, the greater the potential for growth in the future. Everyone understood the principle of accumulation. Strictly speaking, there was nothing wrong with this saying. However, it was a little different when it came to breaking through to the immortal realm. If one were to explain the specific reason as a researcher, it would be a very complicated and professional topic. To sum it up, if a soul that had not yet entered the immortal realm was imprinted with too many principles, it would be like layers of silk threads that would eventually form a cocoon, forming a cage of principles that would become the shackles of one's cultivation. This shackle was for cultivators when they completed their life transformation and reached the immortal realm. Simply speaking, the more principles one comprehended, the stronger the cultivation shackles would be. It was enough to trap a cultivator here forever, and they would never be able to step into the immortal realm again. However, there were too many of them. After countless years and countless cultivators had tried, it was finally determined that there were 10 of them. That's right, once one grasped more than 10 rules before entering the godly state, they would naturally form an untouchable yet real rule cage. As for Chinyu, even if no one knew exactly how many laws he had grasped, just based on the matter of the God-confining gorge, one could speculate that there were at least several hundred laws, or even more. It was dozens of times stronger than the bottom line formed by the cage of rules. One could imagine how strong the shackles on his cultivation would be. Breaking through to the divine realm. Haha, the hope was so slim that it could be ignored. Beneath the octagonal pavilion, everyone's eyes fell on Chinyu. No matter what their true emotions were, they all revealed looks of pity. If one didn't enter the immortal realm, one's life level wouldn't be able to advance, and one's soul wouldn't be able to transform. One's future achievements would be limited. Today, Chinyu's strength was tyrannical to the extreme, no weaker than theirs. In fact, he was even stronger. But so what? As time passed, they would continue to advance. In the end, they would rise to a higher level, and the strength of the two sides would no longer be comparable. This was the tragic conclusion reached by countless cultivators who had died from depression over the endless years, using themselves as an example. Shan Lingwei sighed. Fellow Taoist Chinyu, I don't know what problems have occurred with your body, but before entering the divine realm, there is a taboo in perceiving the rules. This is something that any cultivator with an inheritance should be reminded of. He shook his head, a look of regret on his face. It was as if he could already see Chinyu's bewildered and dispirited back after suffering a heavy blow. But unexpectedly, after hearing all of this, Chinyu only frowned for a moment before his expression returned to normal. Oh, so that's how it is. What kind of answer was this? In the calmness, there was a hint of understanding. But even more, one could clearly feel his calmness. Did he not know that this meant that in the future, his cultivation path had been completely severed? In this life, he would be restricted to the divine realm. When his lifespan came to an end, he would be filled with unwillingness and turn to dust. Facing such a situation, no one could remain calm, right? Or could it be said that Chinyu had suffered such a great blow that his mind was no longer clear? East Zhou Zhili hesitated for a moment. She said in a soft voice, Chinyu, nothing in this world is set in stone. What others can't do doesn't mean you don't have a chance. He was a direct disciple of the ruler. Even if he hadn't been truly confirmed with his status, he might still have a chance. After all, that was the supreme and omnipotent ruler. But all of this was a matter for the future. The myriad soul Tao was about to open, and Chinyu was doomed to miss it. And because of this, she would lose the greatest support that she could rely on. Looking into East Zhou Zhili's eyes, Chinyu could clearly feel the helplessness and complexity in her heart. With a thought, he understood why she was like this. His lips curved up in a smile. He said, "Miss Isho, how long until the myriad soul Tao opens?" Every cultivator that obtained a quota and was allowed to enter the myriad soul Tao would establish a faint connection with it. The existence of this connection allowed them to approximate when the myriad soul Tao would open. Once it did, they would be directly pulled in. Strictly speaking, Qin Yu's question was a bit presumptuous, but after a moment of hesitation, East Zhou Zhili gave him an answer. Within 7 days. Qin Yu said, "That's enough." He cupped his hands together. "Then I asked Miss East Zhou to arrange a place for me to go into seclusion. I will leave within 7 days." Although he didn't explicitly say it, everyone understood why Qin Yu was in seclusion at this time. He wanted to break through his limits in 7 days and condense a god spirit mark to reach the divinity realm. Beneath the pavilion, the air fell silent. As everyone looked at Qin Yu, they were stunned for a moment before revealing expressions of absurdity and ridicule. Reach the divinity realm in 7 days? Even if an ordinary cultivator wanted to knock open the dragon gate and condense a god spirit mark, they would need to make many preparations before doing so. Only then would they have a greater chance of success. Moreover, this was the situation Qin Yu was currently facing. East Zhou Zhili's eyes brightened. If she didn't know Qin Yu's true identity, she would naturally find his words laughable. And yet, standing behind him was a supreme sovereign. To turn the rotten into the miraculous, to turn a hopeless situation into a smooth road. Although it was hard to believe, it wasn't impossible. This was because a ruler meant controlling all and subverting all. No problem. In my residence, there is an excellent seclusion chamber. My cultivation won't be disturbed at all. In Qin Yu's eyes, a ruler-level teacher didn't exist at all. In fact, with his current level, he didn't even know that there was such a terrifying existence as a ruler in this world. But he was still confident he could break through the shackles of his cultivation and transform himself, stepping into the divinity realm. It wasn't just because of the jade embryo egg, but also because of the existence of the sun and moon force field. Qin Yu's level of life had already surpassed that of the entire world, and he wasn't restricted by the heavens and earth. Because there were too many law marks in his soul, it caused his cultivation to be shackled. This was a restriction that came from the heavens and earth itself. Thus, to Qin Yu, this wasn't a problem at all. If he wanted to break into the divinity realm, he could do so without too much difficulty. In fact, it was even simpler than an ordinary cultivator's. He had East Zhou Chali send someone to explain the situation to Xiang Shui. Then, without delay, he went into seclusion. Although he didn't feel any pressure about breaking into the divinity realm, this was the first time in his life, and he didn't have any experience, so it was best to be a bit more cautious. The myriad soul Tao would open for at most 7 days. He couldn't afford any accidents or setbacks. This time, no matter what, Qin Yu had to enter the myriad soul Tao. With East Zhou Chali's current status in her family, her private training chamber was certainly top quality. At the very least, it was the best room Qin Yu had ever used since he started cultivating. Not only was it large, but the materials used to build it were also incomparably precious. For instance, the floor was paved with an unknown pure white jade that had the effect of calming the mind and enhancing one's ability to sense the rules of the world. It could increase one's cultivation efficiency by at least 10%. Sitting cross-legged on a cushion, Qin Yu rubbed the point between his eyebrows. On the road of cultivation, one had to follow the flow of water. When one grew to a certain limit, they would naturally be able to break into higher realms. But it was better to have someone guiding him. Not only could he avoid taking detours, but there might even be unexpected harvests. As a mysterious cultivator with a great background, someone that even the dignified East Zhou family clan had been stunned by, no matter how willing Qin Yu was, he couldn't ask them for guidance on cultivation. But fortunately, he had a better candidate. He closed his eyes, and with a slight thought, through the powerful contract they had signed, he was able to form a connection with the consciousness far away. In the next moment, Qin Yu's consciousness was pulled into the world of his mind. A towering stone pagoda appeared in front of him, towering like the clouds. The pagoda was pure white like jade and emitted endless light. You want to break into the divinity realm? Now? Before Qin Yu could speak, the stone pagoda seemed to know everything. Thoughts fluctuated in response, as if it was mocking him. Qin Yu looked up at the towering stone pagoda and calmly said, "That's right." These two simple words were calm but firm. The stone pagoda fell silent. It wasn't shaken by Qin Yu's firm words, but was digesting the fact that it had encountered such a stupid master. And most importantly, this master wasn't something it had chosen. Rather, it was a choice it had no choice but to make in the face of a life or death threat. After all, it was the lesser of two evils. "Are you an idiot?" The stone pagoda roared and jumped up from the ground. The tip of the pagoda drooped down like a person bending over. It stared straight at Qin Yu. "I don't care why you're doing this. If you make a breakthrough to the divine realm now, you will regret it in the future." Qin Yu lightly said, "Then regret it." "I absolutely will not agree." "You can disagree, because I'm not asking for your opinion on this matter." Qin Yu narrowed his eyes. "Perhaps you have already forgotten your current status. Everything I say, just do as I say." Bang! The earth violently shook. In a world of his mind, between the deep blue skies, massive black clouds gushed out and strong winds howled. Qin Yu lifted a hand and pointed a finger forward. All of this instantly vanished from sight, as if the entire world had been paused. "I don't want to repeat myself a second time. Understand?" The stone pagoda rapidly shrank. In the blink of an eye, it was only the size of a knuckle and was grasped in his palm. Chapter 1002. There was no such thing as an airtight wall in this world. Even if the powerful Eastern Zhou family managed their base airtight, it was impossible to completely isolate them from the outside world. In particular, as the Myriad Soul Dao was about to open, news related to Qin Yu was listed as the highest priority. In just several days, the Eastern Zhou family had secretly dealt with over a dozen cultivators. Several of them had even been regarded as trusted aides of the family for many years. In order to place these spies in, not only did it require long-term planning and careful arrangements, but it also required luck. Every one of them could be said to be incomparably precious. Now that they had been activated without hesitation, it could be seen just how much they valued Qin Yu. After paying such a heavy price, it was naturally impossible for the Eastern Zhou family to completely block off news related to Qin Yu. Thus, news that his cultivation had yet to reach the deity realm was spread out in the shortest possible time. The hidden waves came to an abrupt stop. All plans involving Qin Yu were terminated, and all parties withdrew their tentacles to probe the Eastern Zhou family. As for the news that Qin Yu had gone into seclusion at Eastern Zhou Chali's residence, and that he would leave within 7 days, no one believed this. They certainly knew of the existence of the Cage of Laws. They also knew that with Qin Yu's current condition, let alone 7 days, even if he was given 1,000 years or 10,000 years, he would still have no hope of breaking through. He would forever be trapped in the deity realm. Such a Qin Yu would still be formidable, but to all parties, there was no longer any need to win him over. The gathered attention quickly retreated. Since he had no value, they couldn't clash with the Eastern Zhou family because of him. Eastern Zhou Chali received a notice from the Council of Elders, requesting that she select a new follower from the list of candidates to replace Qin Yu as soon as possible. As for the contract she had signed with Qin Yu, she couldn't even enter the Myriad Soul Dao, so she could only give up. Chali, don't have any more delusions. Qin Yu's status is indeed noble, but his value as an investment has fallen to the lowest. Although I don't know how he reached this step, even if he is the disciple of a ruler, I fear he will never be recognized. Sitting opposite her was an elder who had a close relationship with Eastern Zhou Chali's late father. The Myriad Soul Path is about to open. You don't have much time left. You can't waste any more time. He took out a jade slip and placed it on the table. Inside this is a list of cultivators to choose from. It is best if you give the Council of Elders your answer tomorrow. We will do our best to respect your choice. But you also know that the position of a follower not only concerns your own interests, but also the internal game within the family. So, I can't guarantee the final result for now. Uncle Jelly of Dongzhou hesitated. The family elder across from her frowned and glanced at her. His thoughts raced, and it was unknown what he was thinking. His expression grew even grimmer. Jiali, the myriad-souled Tao concerns your future. You can't take any risks. I don't care what sort of relationship exists between you and Qinyu. He has already lost the chance to enter the myriad-souled Tao. You should be well aware of this. Stop dreaming and give me the name list by tomorrow. Do you hear me? East Zhou Chali took a deep breath, stood up and bowed. Yes, clan uncle. When the family elder left, she turned and looked towards where Qinyu was in seclusion. She bitterly smiled. Qinyu, if you really can break into the divine realm, then do it as soon as possible. Seclusion chamber. Qinyu sat down cross-legged. An aura lingered around him, shaking and yet blurry. It was boundless and heavy, and there was a faint suppressive feeling about it. He had encountered trouble. The cage of laws hadn't been able to bring Qinyu any trouble. Wrapped within the sun-moon force field, he was a transcendent existence. The problem occurred when he made a breakthrough in his cultivation and condensed a god spirit mark. Originally, when a cultivator knocked open the dragon gate of heaven and earth and perceived the great Tao rules, they would naturally weave together. Underneath the influence of a mysterious strength, they would condense a complete divine mark and step into the divine realm. But the number of great Tao rules Qinyu used to condense his god spirit mark seemed to be a bit too much. Or it could be said that the mysterious strength that descended was too little, not enough to support the complete condensation of the world rules. As a result, his cultivation was stuck at the threshold between the divine realm and the divine realm. He had broken through his limits and completed the transformation of life. He had indeed reached the divine realm, but he hadn't been able to smoothly condense a divine mark. Thus, he couldn't obtain a normal fusion with the world. If he couldn't fuse, he would naturally be rejected. This was the reason why Qinyu was shrouded in that obscure and heavy aura. Moreover, what caused Qinyu to bitterly smile was that as time passed, this repulsive strength continued to strengthen. According to this speed, even if his mortal body was tyrannical enough, he still wouldn't be able to last much longer. At that time, he feared he would be crushed to pieces. He had broken into the divine realm, but still couldn't condense a god spirit mark. Because of this, he would be rejected by the world and crushed to death. If he really ended up like this, Qinyu felt that he would definitely be chosen as one of the 10 most tragic deaths in the cultivation world. So this sort of unbearably tragic result was absolutely unacceptable. Is this what you meant when you said I broke into the divine realm too early? Now I can't even smoothly condense a god spirit mark. If I wait any longer and perceive more rules, it will only be more difficult than it is now. Within the world of his mind, Qinyu looked straight at the stone pagoda in front of him. As he spoke, his complexion was incomparably ugly. Currently, this stone pagoda was only 4 or 5 meters tall. It was still crystal clear and emitted a dazzling light, but it didn't have its previous aura. Vaguely, one could feel a trace of awkwardness coming from it. This world seemed to have changed a little from the past. In the past, when cultivators broke into the divine realm, there wasn't such trouble. Facing Qinyu's question, it thought for a moment and decided that the words silence is golden were very reasonable. But soon his next words caused the stone pagoda to change its mind. You can remain silent now, but if I am unlucky, you won't be any better off. We are all grasshoppers on the same rope. If we die together. Qinyu was the master of the stone pagoda. He had the right to choose whether or not to destroy the stone pagoda with him. This was something that the stone pagoda was well aware of. I don't fear hardship or suffering. I only cannot accept death. Using these words to describe the stone pagoda was the most appropriate. So, as it heard the word death from Qinyu's mouth, it immediately lost its composure. My glorious life as a pagoda has just begun. How can I accompany a brat like this and die like this? I can't remain silent any longer. Cough. In truth, with the current situation, it isn't that there is no other way. Chapter 1003. If the stone pagoda said it had a way, then it certainly had a way. In the current situation, it didn't dare to make fun of Chinyu again. Speak. Chinyu's response was simple and direct. The stone pagoda was silent for a moment. Then it said, "As you can sense, when a cultivator breaks through the limit and steps into the divine realm, the rules of the world they control will begin to weave together under the influence of a mysterious strength, condensing into a divine spirit mark." I think you know the important point. I don't have time to listen to your long speech right now. The important point is that a long time ago, there were some people who were extremely confident in themselves. They weren't willing to completely hand over the condensation of a divine spirit mark to an unknown strength, so they chose to do it themselves. If the stone pagoda could condense a face, it would definitely be smirking right now. Its cold and lofty expression would also reveal a bit of disdain. Of course, with your boundary, you probably don't know that the quality of a divine spirit mark is directly related to the strength you can obtain after stepping into the divine realm. Because of this divine mark, you can even obtain some incomparably wonderful lucky chances between the heavens and earth. Let me remind you one last time. The important point. The stone pagoda swore that if it had a chance in the future, it would definitely push Chinyu into the ground and rub him against it 10,000 times. This fellow, didn't he know that when others were showing off, being a qualified spectator was the most basic quality of a person? Just wait. I believe that this day will eventually come. But for now, I'll endure it. Because of certain reasons, I happen to know of a method that can condense a divine spirit mark. The stone pagoda straightforwardly said, "But I must remind you that a divine spirit mark isn't as simple as weaving together the law marks and forming some sort of high and mighty shape. It is a mark that is compatible with the heavens and earth, one that obtains the recognition of the heavens and earth. It is an extremely complex mark. The slightest mistake or deviation will cripple the divine seal. If you really reach this step, even if you break through to the divine realm, it will be the worst kind. Basically, in the future, you can no longer hope to improve your cultivation. So, there's a method, but you had best consider it carefully. If there is a problem, don't blame me for not warning you." Chinyu frowned for a moment before composing himself. This process probably took less than a breath of time. Give me the method to condense the divine mark. It wasn't that he was so impulsive that he didn't think about something as important as condensing the God Spirit mark. But in the current situation, he had already thought of all aspects, and there was no other way at all. Since there was no other way, even if he knew that there was a risk and that he would be crippled, he could only brace himself and continue. This was because if he crippled himself, he would at least be able to continue living, and as long as he was alive, there would be countless possibilities in this world. Death was the greatest horror that could end everything. To tell the truth, although he looked down on Chinyu's cultivation and was extremely disgusted by Chinyu's refusal to cooperate with him, Shirta had to admit that Chinyu's decisiveness was very admirable. If it had been anyone else, even if they knew that this was the only way to break the seal, they would have hesitated for a long time since it involved their future. With Chinyu as an example, the stone pagoda had encountered some people with this sort of temperament before, and they had all been doing fairly well. Perhaps this master that it had no choice but to acknowledge wasn't as bad as it had imagined. It could still have a little hope for the future. Of course, these thoughts remained in its heart. The stone pagoda absolutely wouldn't reveal any of them. This brat Chinyu, he didn't give it any face at all. If he knew that it appreciated him just a little bit more, wouldn't he turn the heavens upside down? Haha, I absolutely can't give him this chance. Since you want the method to condense a divine seal, then I will give it to you. As for the result, that will depend on your own luck. After all, there had never been two identical divine seals in this world. The process of condensing one could only depend on Qin Yu himself. No one could interfere. Hum! A warm current poured into his mind. With a light hum in his ears, it immediately exploded, turning into a massive amount of information that was branded into his soul. Qin Yu closed his eyes, carefully perceiving the method of condensing a divine seal that he received from the stone pagoda. After a long time, he let out a long breath. So it could also be like this. He really couldn't imagine just what sort of amazing character could think of this method in the past. To actually act on behalf of the heavens and earth, to control a mysterious strength for one's own use, to condense one's own will into a divine spirit seal that could be born. Of course, one could also understand this. Just what sort of arrogant and confident fellow would dare to do such a thing? After all, a single wrong step would lead to an endless abyss. This was simply madness. And now, Qin Yu was about to become one of these crazy fellows. He carefully deliberated and determined that he had completely grasped the method of condensing a divine seal. There wasn't the slightest bit of ambiguity. Qin Yu took a deep breath. With a thought, the law marks that wove together in his soul and hadn't been able to smoothly condense began to tremble. This sort of vibration originated from his soul and spread outwards. Finally, it triggered the repulsive pressure of the world outside his body, forming some sort of resonance with it. Perhaps this was proof of the saying that out of the 50 paths of the great Tao, only one could escape. Even in a hopeless situation, the world was still willing to give one a slim chance of survival. This was because after the repulsive and crushing strength of the world resonated with the trembling of the rules, its own fluctuations began to mobilize the mysterious strength that descended from the dark. Through the trembling of one's own law marks, one could cause the repulsive strength of the world to resonate and mobilize the mysterious strength in the dark. Finally, the law marks wove together. Just by repeating this process once, one could feel how complex it was. In reality, the difficulty could be imagined. To condense a perfect divine spirit mark that met one's own requirements in this state was nearly impossible. Endless years ago, most cultivators that tried to take this step had ruined themselves, causing them to shed tears of regret. Even if there were one or two that succeeded, it was negligible when compared to the base number. It was because of this that this crazy cultivation method gradually disappeared from the world, losing its own inheritance. But now, since he had reached this step, there was no need to think about it any further. Qin Yu poured all of his mind into the trembling of the law marks. Little by little, he tried to push the mysterious strength to revolve. As for what sort of divine spark he wanted to condense, in truth, he had no idea. But in the method of condensing a divine seal, there was a sentence mentioned. Everyone is different, and the path of blending in with the heavens and earth is also different. Follow your heart, and you can find yourself. The general meaning was that everyone was different, and condensing a divine seal was also different. As long as he followed his feelings, he could obtain a divine spark that suited him. Of course, the premise was that he had to walk the right path. If he turned into a fork or slipped and fell into a ditch, then that would be embarrassing. But after Qin Yu waited for a long time, he discovered a serious problem. Why hadn't his feelings appeared yet? If he didn't feel anything, then it was tasteless. It was like asking if water was bitter or spicy. This he didn't know. What should he do? That damned stone pagoda. Was it deliberately trying to trick him? No, this matter didn't have any advantages for it. If Qin Yu was unlucky, it couldn't hide on the side and watch the fun either. There was a high chance that its fate would be even more miserable than Qin Yu's. Then why? Qin Yu wanted to know the reason, but what the reason wasn't the most important matter right now. If he couldn't follow his feelings, then he could only rely on his intuition. If this was true, then the divine spirit mark he finally formed would surely be extremely touching. His mouth tasted a bit bitter, but the arrow was already knocked. It had to be released. Qin Yu took a deep breath. His thoughts stirred, and the law marks in his soul slowly moved. Bang! There was a loud explosion in his mind. This feeling was even more terrifying than 10 thunderclaps exploding in his ears. Chinyu felt his consciousness fly away. Then, in the next moment, he fell into darkness. His consciousness collapsed, and he lost control of the strength within his body. Once the process of condensing the divine spirit mark was stopped, he would suffer a backlash from the world. To violate the might of the heavens and earth and attempt to use one's will to direct the condensation of the divine spirit mark. It would be fine if he succeeded, but if he failed, he would inevitably pay a heavy price. The consequences were something that even the current Qin Yu couldn't withstand. But this terrifying situation didn't occur. This was because after Qin Yu's consciousness fell into darkness, the law marks in his soul space were suddenly wrapped up by an invisible strength and began to weave at an astonishing speed. The outline of a god spirit mark gradually appeared. Its complexity was beyond imagination. When one looked at it, they immediately felt a swelling pain in their heads, as if they were being torn apart. This god spirit mark that had yet to condense actually possessed some kind of extremely terrifying power. In the next moment, all around Qin Yu, the repulsive strength of the world that was resonating with the law marks began to violently tumble about. It was like a giant grinding stone that wanted to pull him in and grind him into powder. It was like the world itself, after sensing this aura, didn't allow this divine mark to truly descend into the world. Bang! There was a heaven-shaking explosion. It was like towering mountains colliding with each other as they moved at high speeds. A strength broke out from Qin Yu's body. It resisted the crushing strength of the world and actually didn't fall behind it all. But it couldn't be forgotten that this strength was also helping Qin Yu condense the divine spirit mark. From this, one could infer that it could easily deal with the crushing strength of the world. From this, one could imagine just how powerful it was, resisting the crushing strength of the world on the outside and condensing the divine spirit mark on the inside. But this divine spirit mark was far too complex. It was so complex that even the number of law marks in Qin Yu's soul wasn't enough to support its condensation. What if there wasn't enough? The best and most direct method was to make up for the gap. The strength that led the divine spirit mark to condense paused for a moment. Then, a loud explosion erupted from Qin Yu's body. It was like a great beast that had been slumbering for countless years was slowly awakening with a loud roar. The crushing strength of the world outside suddenly came to a standstill. Then it exploded into pieces. In the next moment, the shredded strength of the world howled into Qin Yu's body. His body was like an endless abyss that could swallow all as it was sucked into his body. Eastern Zhou Chali's private training chamber was indeed of an extremely high standard. But in front of this strength, it was as fragile as an eggshell. With just a light touch, it shattered into countless pieces. Thus, the entire Eastern Zhou family station was alarmed. Countless cultivators looked up in amazement at Qin Yu's seclusion chamber. In their senses, they could clearly hear the pained wails of the world itself. It was like an incomparably delicate little girl being pressed into a pile of hay by a thick and sturdy man, and then ravaged and ravaged again and again. The higher one's cultivation was, the clearer their senses became. Their complexions became increasingly solemn, and their eyes filled with endless horror. Because at this moment, someone was plundering the world, forcefully taking the world's rules and fusing them into their own body. There were countless laws in the world and countless great Taoists. They existed here, evolved from the world itself. They could be perceived, they could be controlled, and they could also be plundered. But the premise was that you had enough strength to ensure that you could do this. Moreover, you wouldn't die to the backlash of the world's will. Originally, this was something that only existed in legends. But today, it was finally confirmed that there were truly such fierce and ferocious characters in this world. The place where this occurred was Eastern Zhou Chali's residence. After a brief search, they discovered that the one who caused this commotion was Qin Yu, who was in seclusion. The entire Eastern Zhou family was shaken. Someone had even directly taken action to plunder the world's rules. Was it really that difficult to break through the cage of rules and condense a God spirit mark? Compared to this wasn't anything at all. Could it be that this was Qin Yu's mysterious master, whose origin he still didn't know? Ruler, perhaps only this sort of transcendent existence that stood above the myriad worlds and could even replace a portion of the world itself, could possess such terrifying abilities. Their judgment was clearly wrong. Qin Yu is absolutely not a crippled disciple of a ruler who would find it difficult to rise up in the future. On the contrary, if an unparalleled ruler could personally help him break into the divine realm, then he must be the most favored and favored successor. Such a Qin Yu's status and value would rise by more than 100 times over. But what left the Eastern Zhou family depressed was that the disturbance Qin Yu caused today was far, far too great. It was so great that they couldn't conceal it no matter what. In other words, today's events would soon spread to all sides. Plundering the world for his own use and smoothly breaking into the divine realm. Even if his status as a ruler's disciple wasn't known, the current Qin Yu would still incite a mad scramble for him. Charlie, you and Qin Yu are old friends. No matter what price you must pay, you must keep him in the family. You absolutely cannot lose him. The family elder who had warned Eastern Zhou Charlie to quickly choose a candidate to follow had a completely different attitude now. He hesitated for a moment and then said with a deep look in his eyes, "Although it is a bit inappropriate for me to say these words, if there are any feelings between you and Qin Yu, you must grasp them well. If you can walk together with him, that will be the greatest lucky chance of your life. Even the entire Eastern Zhou family will benefit from it." Chapter 1004. Eastern Zhou Jelly revealed a trace of embarrassment. She helplessly said, "Elder, you are overthinking things. Although Qin Yu and I are old acquaintances, the most appropriate word to describe our relationship is cooperation. There is nothing else involved." The family elder smiled. He said in a soft voice, "Jolly, you are confused by the situation. With Qin Yu's status, there are countless ways he could have entered the myriad soul Dao. So why would he go through so much trouble to chase you here and willingly become your follower?" Eastern Zhou Jolly's heart skipped a beat. Although she still felt that the elder's words weren't too likely, a faint blush crept onto her face. This was because there seemed to be some truth in his words. Could Qin Yu really have feelings for her? Qin Yu's figure appeared in her mind, and she suddenly felt a bit panicked. She took a deep breath and suppressed her chaotic thoughts. "Elder, please rest assured that no matter what, I will do my best to keep Qin Yu here." "That's good. If you need support from the family, you can directly report it. The Eastern Zhou family will give you the greatest degree of authority." The family elder had a dignified expression. "You must know that Qin Yu is the strongest strength you can borrow right now. If you could be on good terms with him and support him, it will be infinitely beneficial to you in the future." Without staying for long, the family elder hurriedly left. The Eastern Zhou family had already anticipated the coming storm. Even if they had absolute confidence in their own strength, they still had to be vigilant in order to prevent any accidents from occurring and others taking advantage of them. As East Zhou Chali was feeling shy and embarrassed, thinking about whether or not she should try to use her beauty to seduce Qin Yu, news of Qin Yu's breakthrough to the divine realm was rapidly spreading out. After confirming the authenticity of this news, Qin Yu, who had lost all value in winning him over, became the focus of attention once more. Plundering the heavens and earth for his own use, although no one knew what happened when Qin Yu broke into the divine realm, just this point alone was enough to fill everyone with confidence in him. The cage of rules couldn't trap him. His breakthrough into the divine realm was already a done deal. Such a Qin Yu was even more mysterious and unfathomable, as if he were hidden in layers of fog. He made one instinctively feel awe. That's right, it was awe. Plundering the heavens and earth and taking its strength for one's own. Just what boundary was needed to accomplish this? Although no one had a clear understanding of it, they could roughly guess what it was. It seemed that the teacher behind Qin Yu, the one who was said to have transcended the heavens, perhaps his strength truly transcended the heavens. Of course, no one believed that Qin Yu had caused such a ruckus today by himself. There was only one possibility, and that was that the towering mountain behind him had taken action. For such a transcendent existence to act and seize the good fortune of the heavens and earth, how could Qin Yu's status be ordinary? He must be highly regarded. Putting aside the matter of the myriad soul path, just the special status that Qin Yu had revealed was enough to cause all parties to take action and compete for his friendship. After all, none of them were stupid. If they could get close to Qin Yu, they would naturally be able to form a connection with the mountain behind him. Just this point alone was enough for them to take some risks and wrestle with the Dongzhou clan. After all the powers that were qualified to enter the myriad soul path possessed some sort of background. It was said that the current fourth miss of the Dongzhou clan was a true beauty. It was said that Eastern Zhou Jolly was an old acquaintance of Qin Yu. It was said that the two of them had a close relationship and their actions were intimate. As the saying went, know yourself and know your enemy, and you would never be defeated in 100 battles. To be able to rise from the boundless heavens and become a powerful influence, they certainly wouldn't lack wisdom and caution. Since they had decided to compete with the Dongzhou clan for Qin Yu, they had to find the key to this matter. Only then would they be able to achieve twice the results with half the effort. And now, as more and more information was gathered, all parties came to the same conclusion. The reason that Qin Yu had gone to the Dongzhou clan was because of Dongzhou Jolly. It would be a lie to say that they weren't envious. After all, the Dongzhou clan hadn't done anything at all. All they had done was raise such an outstanding girl, and they were the first to enjoy the benefits of being close to Qin Yu. In the future, they might even obtain greater benefits. But fortunately, we are also a wealthy family, and we also have many outstanding daughters. It's not as if we don't have a chance. But what excuse could they use to approach Qin Yu so that he wouldn't loathe them? And how could they tear apart the obstruction of the Dongzhou clan? Flies could always find a crack on the surface of an egg, no matter how small it was. Of course, strictly speaking, this description wasn't too appropriate, but it was enough to express one's meaning. As long as one wanted to find someone, there would always be a reason. For instance, within the Dongzhou clan, an elder was about to hold a 3,000-year-old birthday celebration. Although living for 3,000 years wasn't much in the cultivation world, for better or worse one was still one of the Dongzhou clan's elders, so they had the qualifications to celebrate. As for us, we have always maintained a friendly relationship with the Dongzhou clan. Since we know of this matter, it is only reasonable that we come to congratulate them. Only then can we not be disrespectful. We have come on our own initiative to offer our blessings, and we have all sorts of etiquettes. No matter how unwilling your Dongzhou clan is, you can't just drive us away, right? Of course, this was only an elder's 3,000th birthday celebration. It wasn't enough for the leaders of the various families to personally attend. Thus, it would be more appropriate to send some outstanding juniors from the family. Thus, an unknown Dongzhou clan elder soon received countless birthday jade slips with a dumbfounded expression. Each of the youths on this list had a great background. If this were any other time, receiving these birthday jade slips would be a matter of great honor, enough for him to brag about for hundreds of years. But now, even if he thought with his knees, he could tell that these cultivators from all over who had come in the name of offering their blessings all had ill intentions. Otherwise, why would there be so many famous young and beautiful cultivators on this list? What the F***CK? His intentions were beyond reprehensible. The Eastern Zhou family elder who wanted to cry, but had no tears, immediately found himself in a difficult situation. He had never imagined that he would be used by others to create trouble. This was especially true when he felt the dissatisfied gazes of the Council of Elders. He felt even more uneasy. He thought to himself, I'm just a newly promoted little elder with no influence. If I offend the great figures here today, my future will surely be miserable. But I have already sent a letter saying that the birthday celebration has been canceled, but they haven't replied at all. It is clear that they are pretending to be ignorant. So what can I do? I'm also helpless. The Dongzhou clan patriarch had no expression. Since they are so enthusiastic, My Dongzhou clan naturally cannot be disrespectful. If they want to come, then come. After all, excuses are things that can be found as long as one wants to. In the end, it is impossible to avoid them. He had already left seclusion. Although he had only disappeared for a short few days, the feeling he gave off had greatly changed. Before, that omnipresent oppressive aura that lingered around him had now vanished. All that was left was a calm and unruffled air. Standing in front of them, he seemed far away. His aura was erratic and impossible to grasp. Everyone knew that the patriarch must have obtained some harvests during his seclusion. Even if he didn't make a breakthrough on the spot, his cultivation bottleneck had loosened. Like this, as long as he was given enough time, he had a high chance of breaking through his current cultivation and stepping into the strongest realm below the ruler realm. And this was because Qin Yu's arrival had brought benefits to the Dongzhou clan. As long as they maintained good relations with him, there would inevitably be more benefits in the future. How could such a Qin Yu be stolen away by others? Humph humph. What does a beautiful woman count for? Can my Dongzhou clan not produce one? None of you can even think of pulling Qin Yu away from the embrace of the Dongzhou clan. Chapter 1005. The sounds of gongs and drums filled the air, and the place was bustling with noise and excitement. There were as many guests as there were clouds in the sky, and everyone who came and went was of high status. It was a pity that the entire birthday banquet was filled with a sense of carelessness. The host and the guest looked at each other. There was a hint of coldness in their smiles. One was saying that they were dreaming, and the other was saying that they would rely on their own means. The longevity god, who had lived for 3,000 years, wore a bright red robe and sat in the main seat in the middle of the hall. He kept wiping his sweat, his face slightly pale. But the heavens pitied him. He had been preparing for his birthday since 10 years ago. He never imagined that he would encounter something so vexing. Just as the birthday god was about to fall and the birthday banquet was filled with warmth and awkwardness, Qin Yu suddenly opened his eyes. His eyes were blank for a brief moment before his pupils violently shrank. His thoughts stirred, and he examined his entire body. During the process of condensing the God Spirit mark, if one suddenly lost consciousness and lost control of the power in one's body, just thinking about the consequences sent chills down one's spine. But today, the situation seemed to be a bit different from what he had imagined. Qin Yu froze in place. In the boundless sky in the world of his divine consciousness, there was an extremely complicated God's mark made of countless runes intertwining with one another. There were also thousands of lines that looked like curtains hanging down from the God's mark. On the surface of each line, there were spots of light that flickered and flickered. It was difficult to count how many there were. It was as if the stars in the sky were strung onto these lines, and it gave off a feeling of boundless magnificence and nobility. This was his God Spirit imprint? Breakthrough? But the key was, where did this breakthrough come from? Qin Yu was a little confused. Of course, he didn't know that there was a saying that had been passed down since ancient times in this world. When the divine seal is condensed, it is necessary to gather an endless river of stars and string them together to form a curtain of beads, creating a legend. That's right, from today onwards, Qin Yu had begun a legendary era that belonged to him. It was just that, at this time, he still didn't know. What's going on? Qin Yu frowned. The question was out of the blue, but the one who was asked would naturally take a seat according to the number. After a short period of silence, the stone tower's slightly dejected and helpless voice sounded in his mind. If I tell you that the connection between us has just been restored, you should believe me, right? Only the heavens knew just how excited it was just now. This was because its contract with Qin Yu had suddenly vanished. In this sort of situation, the greatest possibility was that its master, Qin Yu, had died and it had regained its freedom. But it was clear that Qin Yu was a bastard who didn't play his cards according to common sense. Not only did he not die, but he actually made a breakthrough. No, it wasn't just a breakthrough. The God Spirit mark he had condensed wasn't very powerful, but the aura it emitted made it feel like it was being suppressed. This sort of suppression that came from a higher level was what the stone tower could not accept the most. This was because it showed that Qin Yu's God's spirit mark was even more noble than it. After all, how is this possible? But no matter how shocked he was, this was the truth placed in front of him. Shurta couldn't help but suspect that this boy was pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger. Could it be that he had a powerful background? Did he really have some kind of extraordinary background? Otherwise, how could he explain the current situation? As the stone tower's mind was in chaos, Qin Yu rubbed his temples. Through their contract, he could confirm that the stone tower wasn't speaking nonsense. It really didn't know anything. With a thought, he severed the connection with the stone tower. The sun and moon force field circulated within his soul space, isolating him from the outside world. Besides the stone tower, Qin Yu had someone more reliable to ask. It was just that he didn't know what it was doing during this period of time, because it had remained in a silent state. Through their connection, he sent out a thought fluctuation. Unfortunately, it was like a stone sinking into the sea. There was no response at all. Qin Yu felt helpless. This little blue lamp fellow was becoming more and more silent. He had no idea what it was doing. Qin Yu took a deep breath and slowly stood up. In any case, what happened was a good thing for him. If he couldn't find a reason for it right now, then he would just wait and think about it later. In this world, everything had a reason. Since it had happened, there would eventually be a day when the truth would be revealed. East Zhou Jolly's training chamber was nearly completely destroyed. Qin Yu walked out from the ruins. As he looked around, his lips twitched, revealing a bit of embarrassment. He clearly remembered that outside East Zhou Jolly's training chamber, there was an incomparably exquisite garden that was filled with all sorts of rare and precious flowers. But now, the ground had nearly been completely overturned. Countless stones were piled up in a messy mess. It had been thoroughly destroyed. East Zhou Jolly had been kind enough to lend him a training chamber, but he had ended up like this. Although he knew that East Zhou Jolly would only be happy that he had broken into the divine realm, he still felt a bit uncomfortable. Before Qin Yu could think any further, a respectful voice sounded out. "May I ask if Mr. Qin has left seclusion?" Qin Yu nodded. Someone immediately stepped forwards and respectfully bowed. "Greetings, Mr. Qin." This person was unfamiliar, and his aura seemed ordinary. But Qin Yu could feel the boundless strength hidden within his body. It was like a dormant volcano that could erupt at any moment. Qin Yu's eyes flashed. "I've left seclusion. Has the myriad soul, Tao, opened?" This was what he was most concerned about right now. The cultivator respectfully said, "Mr. Qin, there's no need to worry. The myriad soul, Tao, has not opened yet. The Miss is currently participating in a birthday banquet, so I ask that Mr. Qin accompany her." Qin Yu frowned. "Birthday banquet? I have no interest. After this ends, have East Zhou Jolly come see me." "Mr. Qin, please wait a moment." The person bowed. "At today's birthday banquet, there are many distinguished guests that have come from Mr. Qin. If Mr. Qin does not appear, I fear that these guests will not be willing to leave. The patriarch has already left seclusion. He and the Miss hope that Mr. Qin can show himself." These words were tactful, but it didn't take Qin Yu much effort to guess the deeper meaning behind them. It seemed that his existence had brought trouble to the East Zhou family. Thinking about it, this was also true. With Qin Yu's performance, he was destined to be fought over by all sides before the myriad soul Tao opened. In particular, now that it was confirmed that he had broken into the divine realm. Qin Yu hesitated for a moment and then nodded. "Lead the way." "Thank you for your understanding, Mr. Qin." The cultivator's expression relaxed. He bowed once more and then turned to lead the way. After stepping out of this nearly destroyed garden, Qin Yu discovered that he had underestimated just how highly the East Zhou family regarded him. Right now, outside the courtyard, there were dozens of cultivators with similar temperaments and clothing as the person in front of him. Disregarding everything else, just the strength of these people alone was enough to face several original divinities if they joined forces. "Greetings, Mr. Qin." Qin Yu nodded. Although he didn't reveal anything on the surface, he was actually more curious. In the eyes of the East Zhou family, Just what sort of status did he have that they valued him so highly? It seemed that this misunderstanding wasn't small at all. In the grand hall of the birthday feast, beside East Zhou Jolly, a maid leaned over and whispered several words into her ear. Her eyes brightened, revealing a trace of happiness. She immediately stood up and walked out. As the true focus of today's birthday feast, East Zhou Jolly's actions attracted everyone's attention. Just as she stepped out of the grand hall, a guest with an extraordinary status directly asked, "May I ask, where did the East Zhou family's fourth miss go?" Everyone was well aware of each other's thoughts. It was just that they all feared each other and didn't dare to blatantly tear apart all pretense of cordiality. At this time, there was no need to hide anything. East Zhou Jolly thought to herself, "You asked me, but who am I supposed to ask? If it weren't for you bastards, would my 3,000th birthday have turned into such dog shit?" But cursing in his heart was cursing in his heart. Since everyone hadn't torn apart all pretense of cordiality, he couldn't be any less amiable. Cough. He lightly coughed and smiled. Just as he was trying to play dumb, a trusted aide walked over and whispered a few words. East Zhou Jolly's complexion changed, and he waved his hand, sending the aide away. He stood up and said, "Everyone, today is my birthday feast, and I have invited an honored guest. I ask that you come with me to welcome him." As he spoke, he stood up and walked into the grand hall. As an elder of the East Zhou family, although he hadn't been around for long and didn't have too much authority, he still had some status. He naturally knew of Qin Yu's background, a ruler's disciple. Just this point alone, if one ignored his own potential, wasn't something that a little elder like him could compare with. The patriarch had given strict orders that no one was to leak this information. As for Qin Yu's status, he certainly didn't dare to violate it. But if his attitude was a bit better and he paid attention to him, even if it was a bit out of line, it shouldn't be a problem, right? After all, who didn't know that the opening of the Myriad Soul Dao was imminent? Qin Yu was a delicious piece of cake, and the entire hall was filled with big bad wolves that wished they could swallow him whole. Hee, I'm doing this to increase the pressure on those big bad wolves. I want them to know that wanting to steal someone from our East Zhou family is nothing more than a dream. Mr. Qin has arrived. A roll call sounded out from outside the hall. This was a courteous reception given to an important guest, a sign of respect. Schwa. The hall instantly fell silent. Everyone's eyes turned to the entrance of the hall. Their eyes brightened, and they secretly admired this person. With East Zhou Jolly's sudden departure and East Zhou Jolly's actions, they weren't idiots. They naturally guessed who this Mr. Qin was. They were truly worthy of being the East Zhou family. Their way of doing things was truly generous. Even though they knew that they had other intentions, they still acted with such an imposing manner. This was clearly saying, "I know what you're thinking. Aren't you looking for a chance to seduce Qin Yu away from our home? Fine, I'll give you that chance. I'll deliver him to you and see just how many methods you have." Of course, admiration was one thing, but they wouldn't hesitate in the slightest when it was time to act. "We came to your East Zhou family with such great fanfare and prepared such a thick list of gifts. Wasn't this all for this?" Cough. It was unknown which cultivator cleared their throat, but there was a clear sound of clothes being adjusted in the hall. The beautiful female cultivators that had followed the procession to congratulate Qin Yu all raised their heads and puffed out their chests, doing their best to appear in their best condition. Before they came, they had been told that whoever could capture Qin Yu would be a meritorious minister to the family. Moreover, according to the news, Qin Yu was a young and handsome man. With such a perfect husband and the support of the family, why wouldn't they try to compete for him? Even if East Zhou Jolly was as beautiful as a flower and excelled in all aspects, we might not be worse than you. These words were a bit lacking in confidence. But even if we were slightly worse than you, everyone had their own preferences. Perhaps I might be the type that Qin Yu liked. In this world, even men could like other men, so what else was impossible? East Zhou Jolly held on to Qin Yu's arm as they entered the hall. Although her face was flushed red, she still maintained a natural and dignified demeanor. Every movement she made exuded the aura of a noble young lady. Great uncle, this is Qin Yu, one of my followers when I entered the Myriad Soul Dao. Today, I learned that you were holding a 3,000th birthday banquet, so I specially came to congratulate you. After she finished speaking, she let go and took a step to the side. She had already expressed her closeness, so she was naturally embarrassed to continue holding on to him. But, to tell the truth, the feeling of holding on to Qin Yu was quite good. Just what were you thinking? At this time, you had better be a bit more rational and not act like a love-struck fool. Qin Yu stepped forward and cupped his hands together. Qin Yu congratulates East Zhou Jolly and Elder Jolly. May your life be as long as the pine and cypress trees of the southern mountains. East Zhou Jolly's face was full of wrinkles as he smiled. With his status in the outside world, he would definitely be filled with honor. It wasn't something that could be moved by some random flattery, but everything had to be said by the person. How could the words spoken by someone of Qin Yu's status be the same? This was face. In the future, when Qin Yu's name spread through the world, today's events would be enough for him to brag about for tens of thousands of years. If he ran into someone, all he had to do was say that Lord Qin Yu, the subordinate of some ruler, had once participated in his 3,000th birthday banquet, and so on. That was an absolutely easy feat to shake the hearts of these random gods. I am honored that little friend Qin Yu could come. Please take a seat. He waved his hand again and again. Men, hurry and prepare a seat for Mr. Qin. Qin Yu stood up. I thank Elder for your good intentions, but I just left seclusion today, and there are some matters I must deal with, so I won't stay here any longer. I have already presented the gifts, so I bid my farewells. After he finished speaking, he turned and left. Mr. Qin, please wait a moment. The person who had asked about East Zhou Jolly's whereabouts spoke up. He stood up and smiled warmly. I am. Before he could state his identity, he was interrupted. Qin Yu lightly said, I have a close friendship with East Zhou Jolly. Since I agreed to be her follower, I will not change my mind. If you have come here today for a reason that involves me, then I can only apologize. After he finished speaking, he turned and left, leaving behind everyone in the hall. All of them stared with wide eyes, feeling as if they were about to choke to death. What benefits did the East Zhou family clan offer him? Or was East Zhou Jolly really so good that you would be so hell-bent on her? You aren't even willing to listen to our conditions? Even if you really don't have any thoughts of changing your mind, wouldn't the East Zhou family clan be nervous if you come into contact with us? If they are nervous, then the conditions you obtain will be even better. To you, this is 100 advantages and no disadvantages. If we can think of all of this, then why can't you think of it? You simply turn around and left without giving them any chance at all. Aren't you an idiot? You prepared a basket full of plans, beauties, treasures, and all sorts of conditions. But Qin Yu wasn't willing to talk at all, so what could you do? East Zhou Jolly let out a long breath. She swept her eyes over the hall. A group of gorgeously dressed female cultivators revealed a look of arrogance and disdain. If translated into words, it could be said, you bunch of mediocre women think you have the qualifications to compete with me? You overestimate yourself. She stood up and bowed. Great uncle, Qin Yu called me just now to help him deal with some matters. This niece apologizes and won't stay any longer. Farewell. She turned and left. Of course, saying that Qin Yu called her out was pure nonsense. But if he said it at this time, no one would doubt it. After all, for her, Qin Yu had given up the chance to come into contact with everyone. It could be seen just how deep his feelings were. The East Zhou family clan was truly lucky to have given birth to such a fierce girl. Fellow Taoist Fu Ru, the family has suddenly sent a message. We must return immediately. Farewell. Same here. We cannot stay any longer today. The Su family will also leave first. We bid our farewells. The cultivators in the hall all rose up. After a moment, most of them had left. Qin Yu's attitude was clear. They didn't even have a chance to approach him. If they continued to stay, they would only be able to watch the East Zhou family clan's smug face and bring disgrace upon themselves. If they wanted to win over Qin Yu, then they had to increase the threat level of East Zhou Jolly. This girl might have some harvests after entering the Myriad Soul Dao. This girl's life was truly good. It wasn't just the outside world that thought this. Even within the East Zhou family clan, they felt that East Zhou Jolly was extremely lucky. If others could think of this, they could also think of it. Qin Yu's firm attitude and his blocking off all contact with other influences, was it really because the East Zhou family clan was filled with sincerity? Haha, don't joke around. If their positions were reversed, the East Zhou family clan wouldn't hesitate to pay any price in order to capture Qin Yu. From the looks of it, perhaps it wouldn't be long before our East Zhou family clan would be able to climb into a relationship with a sovereign lord. This was an incredibly good thing. When a legend descended, it was bound to be accompanied by phenomena. Depending on the level of the legend, phenomena were also divided into sizes. Taking the galaxy and forming a curtain of beads to condense the great Tao Divine Seal was naturally the highest level. The reason that no phenomena appeared after Qin Yu's breakthrough was because some people didn't want him to be too dazzling right now and directly transfer away the phenomena that appeared after his breakthrough. Thus, far away from the world where the East Zhou family clan was stationed, in a wild star region, a trillion rays of light suddenly erupted. They surged like great waves, giving off a nearly corporeal feeling. Guided by an invisible aura, the light constantly shrank inwards, splitting into pieces. Each piece condensed into a single point, radiant and resplendent. If someone could take in the entire starry skies, they would naturally discover that each of these billions of points of light corresponded to a star in the starry sea. It was like a bright projection of the starry sea. There were living beings in the wild star region, but their level of life was extremely low. Although they could witness the descent of this phenomenon, they still didn't know why. Originally, it should have quietly dissipated undetected by the world. But as this bright starry sea projection descended on a planet covered with a wild aura, an old man sat cross-legged in a beast-hide tent. He wore a luxurious robe, and he suddenly opened his eyes. One of his eyes was blind, but this caused his other eye to shine even brighter. He walked out of the tent and looked up at the starry sea that tore through the night and covered the skies. The old man's single eye became increasingly bright, and his lips trembled. True divinity. In this world, another true divinity has been born. Chapter 1006. Although the Eastern Zhou family clan believed that the reason Qin Yu didn't hesitate to reject the olive branches thrown at him was because of Eastern Zhou Jiali. But this didn't mean that they didn't need to do anything. Such a fine son-in-law was hard to find even if they searched for a lantern. They naturally couldn't drag down Eastern Zhou Jiali because of some minor matters and drag down her position in Qin Yu's heart. He couldn't afford to lose the big picture for the sake of small gains. Thus, not only could the benefits not be reduced, but they had to be even more generous so that Qin Yu could feel the full sincerity of the Eastern Zhou family towards him. If he could really marry East Zhou Jiali and become Daoist companions, what was this little sacrifice worth? What Qin Yu didn't know was that the Eastern Zhou clan's thoughts had already diverged and their thoughts were all over the place. So he accepted all the gifts they sent him. The logic was obvious. No matter what, the Dongzhou clan could only be more at ease now that he had accepted the gift. As for Xiang Shui, who was responsible for organizing the list of gifts, she smiled until her eyes turned into slits. Although these things weren't for her, with Qin Yu's personality, if she needed them, then even if she tried to act cute, cough cough, it probably wouldn't be of much use. But as long as he lost his moral integrity and shamelessly rolled around, it would definitely not be a problem for him to get it. Moral integrity and whatnot, it was necessary to have it when needed, but there was no pressure to throw it away when it was not needed. Thinking that the items on the list were no different from her own, Xiang Shui was even more satisfied, and her smile became even more radiant. She thought to herself that the Dongzhou clan's way of doing things was indeed worthy of their name as a giant, and they were very generous. Hurry up and stop laughing. Hurry up and wipe off your saliva. If you drown me later, people will laugh at you to death. Qin Yu said with a look of disgust. Xiang Shui rolled her eyes at him and snorted. She thought, Since you have made a lot of money, I won't argue with you. I heard that some people die in a myriad soul paths inheritance every time. It is very dangerous. You must be careful. I treat you as a thick and strong cash cow. I'm prepared to rely on you to survive in the future, so you absolutely cannot die. Chinyu rolled his eyes in anger. He thought that this woman was becoming more and more insolent lately. She simply dared to say anything to him. Flicking his sleeves, he turned around and left. Don't worry, my life is tough. I'll be fine even if you die. Pursing her lips, Xiang Shui snorted softly and lowered her head to continue browsing the gift list. Xiang Shui snorted and then lowered her head to continue looking through the list. In this world, there was no such thing as a meat pie falling from the heavens. The Eastern Zhou family had sent such a generous gift because Qin Yu had enough value. To put it more bluntly, he was about to enter the myriad soul path. The risk he had to take was worth them paying a great price to rope him in. The greater the gift, the greater the danger that Qin Yu would soon face. Unfortunately, there was nothing she could do in this matter. She could only stare on helplessly from the side. She was it seemed that from the very start, she hadn't been able to help Qin Yu at all. Instead, she had become the one who needed help. The corners of Xiang Shui's mouth twitched, revealing a bitter smile. She lowered her head to look at her towering chest. It looks like the only thing I can repay Qin Yu with is my body. But what a pity, this boy never lacks beautiful women around him. Moreover, he doesn't seem to treat me as a woman at all. I want to take the initiative to throw myself at him, but I can't find a chance to do so. No, I can't be a woman who only knows how to take advantage of others without thinking of anything in return. Humph humph. When a myriad soul sect comes out, I must find a chance to push Qin Yu down and return his favor. I'll also borrow some seeds. It's decided. Xiang Shui lifted her head and puffed out her chest. Her eyes flashed with wisdom and determination. She already had a general plan for this. It was absolutely foolproof. Brat Qin, you can't escape this time. Qin Yu sneezed for no reason at all. He rubbed his nose, thinking that someone was plotting against him. Humph humph, they must be courting death. He was bursting with confidence in his own strength. He didn't know how he had inexplicably condensed a god spirit mark and stepped into the divine realm. But he could clearly feel the boundless strength contained within this god spirit mark. With a thought, he could resonate with the world and mobilize infinite strength. After condensing the god spirit mark, his strength had increased by at least 10 times. Before, he could crush most divine realm cultivators, and now he was even more so. So what if he was at the peak of the divine realm? If he wanted to crush someone, he wouldn't hesitate. Even if he faced an original god cultivator, Qin Yu didn't feel any fear. This wasn't arrogance or conceit. Rather, it was a natural and instinctive form of absolute self-confidence. Qin Yu sat down cross-legged and closed his eyes in concentration. Before he entered the myriad soul sect, he needed to adapt to his rising strength as much as possible. 2 days later, Qin Yu's thoughts stirred and he opened his eyes. In the next moment, East Zhou Jieli's voice resounded in his mind. The myriad soul sect is about to open. Everyone quickly come. This was a summon to his followers through a signed contract. He had finally arrived. Qin Yu stood up. He pushed open the door and saw Xiang Shui. She was casually boiling tea, a relaxed expression on her face. Perhaps it was because the charcoal fire was too hot, but she was wearing light clothes. A large portion of her white chest was exposed, so deep that one couldn't even see the bottom. Qin Yu swore that he didn't have any beastly thoughts towards Xiang Shui. But with this scene in front of him, if he didn't feel anything, could he still be called a man? That was why he took a look, then another look, and on the third look, Xiang Shui coughed lightly, calmly pulling at her clothes, covering up her exposed snow-white skin a little. Qin Yu was satisfied. He smiled, revealing several white teeth. I'm leaving. When you're at home in the future, you should wear more clothes, lest you catch a cold. As he spoke, he turned and left. Xiang Shui stomped her feet in anger. She thought that this brat was too hateful. He had already seen her, and yet he still made such sarcastic remarks. But while she was angry, she was also a bit smug. She thought that her body was still a bit tempting to him. Humph humph, since that's the case, I'm not afraid you can escape from my grasp. Once you come out of the Myriad Soul sect, I'll let you know what it feels like to be squeezed dry. Fellow Taoist Qin. Because he had looked at Xiang Shui with appreciation in his eyes, by the time Qin Yu arrived, everyone had already arrived. They all greeted him. At least several hundred law marks had condensed into a cage of laws, and in just a short few days, he had smoothly broken through. Just this point alone was enough for them to raise their opinion of Qin Yu by several levels. They naturally had to be on good terms with such a character. Perhaps in the future, he would be able to obtain some amazing achievements. East Zhou Jolly remained calm. She glanced at Ru Ruoxian, thinking, you old witch, just what are you trying to do? Qin, you must have been blind to have taken a liking to this strange skill of yours. Cough. With a light cough, she drew everyone's attention. Then, with a solemn expression, she said, everyone, the Myriad Soul sect will soon open. Please do not leave my side. Once the transmission begins, I will sign a contract and pull everyone away with me. Remember, during this process, do not resist. Everyone nodded. A moment later, above East Zhou Jolly's head, space suddenly collapsed inwards and a black hole appeared. Hum, hum. An invisible strength instantly erupted, surging between the 6 people and wrapping them within. In the next moment, a powerful pulling strength arrived, directly pulling them into the black hole where they vanished from sight. The inheritance of the Myriad Soul sect, which had existed for countless years and was said to possess the transcendent path of the great Tao, opened once more today. The white space of nothingness was vast and boundless. Time seemed to have lost all meaning here, as if nothing had changed since time immemorial. But in this world, it was impossible for anything to truly be eternal and unchanging. After all, even the supreme sovereigns had the possibility of perishing. What else couldn't happen? A spot of darkness appeared without warning and rapidly expanded outwards. In a breath of time, it grew to 1,000 feet in size, as solid as black jade. It was like the projection of the legendary divine creation of the world had opened. After the 1,000-foot black jade platform appeared, the white space of nothingness began to change. Mountains, rivers, deserts, canyons, besides having no life, this was a true world. However, it only took a few breaths of time for this world to appear from non-existent to appear. On the black jade platform, the 6 figures that were transmitted here saw all of this occur. At this time, they all had shocked expressions on their faces. The so-called miracle was nothing more than this. The Myriad Soul sect's reputation was well-deserved. Just from the scene before them, one could see just how formidable it was. This was because they were well aware that the world in front of them didn't truly exist, but they couldn't sense any flaws. Even though they knew it was an illusion, they still couldn't find any flaws. This was the most terrifying aspect. East Zhou Jolly closed her eyes, as if she were receiving some invisible message. After Qin Yu and the others gathered their thoughts, they surrounded her in the center, their eyes sharp. Before they could help East Zhou Jolly obtain the true qualifications to enter the land of inheritance, they had to ensure her safety. Otherwise, if something were to happen to her, and she was implicated by the contract, they would also be eliminated and lose the chance to obtain lucky chances. Followers. Currently, they were only followers. But once the person they followed smoothly obtained the qualifications for the inheritance, they would have the chance to compete for the inheritance. Even though it was rather difficult, it was enough for countless people to disregard everything for it. After all, the difficulty of obtaining a spot to enter the Myriad Soul path was terrifyingly high. Every single person who succeeded was either extremely lucky, or they were all geniuses. Furthermore, they needed a powerful background to support them. Not everyone had the chance to obtain a spot to enter the Myriad Soul sect. Thus, becoming a follower was the only choice. If not for this, why would so many cultivators be willing to pay any price to obtain a spot to become a follower? Schwa. East Zhou Jolly opened her eyes. For the opening of the Myriad Soul sect this time, the test is to occupy 3 round platforms and obtain the qualifications for the inheritance. A spot to enter the Myriad Soul sect only represented a chance to enter. If one wanted to obtain the inheritance, they would need to undergo a strict test. Moreover, every time the Myriad Soul sect opened, the test method was different. This time, it was a choice of 3. 3 spots to enter would determine a spot for the inheritance. This meant that, including the 2 cultivators that entered, at least 12 people would need to be eliminated. If one could enter the Myriad Soul sect, then no one was willing to be eliminated. If they didn't want to be eliminated, then they could only do their best to eliminate others. Thus, no one could do anything about it. They could only rely on their own ability to go all out. Zhou Jolly clearly knew the grim situation they were facing. Her thoughts raced, and she said, "I have a suggestion." She turned around and looked at Qinyu. After a brief pause, she continued, "Qinyu will stay here and guard the round platform so that it is not occupied. I and the other 4 fellow Taoists will leave and seize the second round platform." Space suddenly fell silent. Shang Lingyue and the other 3 people's eyes widened, shock in their eyes. They clearly didn't expect that Zhou Jolly would place such a high value on Qinyu. It seemed that the Zhou clan must have grasped some information they didn't know. For instance, Qinyu's true origins. Chapter 1007. Every cultivator that entered the Myriad Soul Dao had 5 followers. If they wanted to seize the other round platforms, they would have to divide into 2 groups. Qinyu would be left alone to guard while Zhou Jolly and the other 4 attacked. Based on pure probability, there was a high chance they would succeed. This was indeed the best way to deal with this situation. Of course, the premise was that Qinyu could defend the round platform. Otherwise, if it was taken by someone else, the 6 of them would be eliminated. In this matter, Zhou Jolly's attitude was crucial. After all, before the contract was completed, she was the leader. The Myriad Soul Dao involved a great deal, and she absolutely wouldn't act recklessly. Since she did this, she must have a certain degree of confidence. Qinyu's strength was likely far greater than what he appeared on the surface. Thus, after a brief moment of shock, Shang Lingyue and the others all looked at Qinyu and then silently agreed. Qinyu thought for a moment and nodded. "All right, I will defend this place with all my strength." Zhou Jolly turned and left. "Let's go." Whoosh, whoosh, 5 figures howled into the distance. This woman was decisive enough. Once she decided on her intentions, she immediately took action. Although Qinyu had a considerable degree of confidence in his own strength, he didn't dare to be careless in the least. After all, in the endless heavens, powerhouses were as numerous as carps in a river. Who could guarantee that they could stand in an invincible position? If Zhou Jolly trusted him so much, he certainly had to do his best to live up to her trust. Qinyu took a deep breath and sat down cross-legged. He closed his eyes and completely released his divine sense. Even the slightest movement in the wind couldn't escape his senses. An hour later, Qinyu opened his eyes, a trace of surprise in them. He never imagined that trouble would come knocking on his door so quickly. Moreover, there were 5 of them. It seemed that they had made the same decision as Zhou Jolly. Standing up, Qinyu stood atop the round platform. His eyes were indifferent, but there was a cold chill in them. He slowly said, "Since you've come, show yourself." After a brief silence, space fluctuated and 5 figures appeared. They looked at Qinyu with surprise, as if they never thought they would be discovered so quickly. It's him. Qinyu, damn, how could it be him?" Several people shouted out. It was clear they knew of Qinyu's existence, and they all had gloomy expressions. The news of the god-confining gorge being broken had already spread throughout the world. In addition, Qinyu had confirmed that he would become Eastern Zhou Jolly's follower and enter the Myriad Soul Path. Information related to him would naturally be collected with great emphasis. Even though no one knew where he came from, his silhouette and appearance had to be remembered to avoid unnecessary trouble. Originally, When they confirmed that there was only one person on the round platform, the 5 of them who had stealthily sneaked over were very excited. Even if the other party dared to guard the round platform alone, he must be very powerful. However, with 5 against 1, it was impossible for them to lose. But who would have thought that this person would be the incomparably powerful and unfathomable Chinyu, whose fame had spread far and wide? If he were to turn around and leave right now, he wouldn't be willing to give up on his face and whatnot. After all, leaving one person to guard the round platform while the 5 of them were attacking was an extremely risky move. The longer he delayed outside, the greater the risk he would face. Once his round platform was taken away, he would be done for. So what if he is Chinyu? No matter how strong he is, can he defeat the 5 of us working together? One of the cultivators clenched his teeth and roared out loud. They didn't care about face, but if they turned around and left to find a second round platform, who knew how much time they would have to waste? Of course, the more important reason was, as this cultivator had said, although the rumors said Chinyu was fierce, they had no idea just how fierce he really was. If the 5 of them joined forces, they could even contend with an original divinity. So how could they not be his match? That's right, no matter how fierce he has only just entered the divine realm. Let's go and steal the round platform. With loud shouts, the hesitation in the eyes of these people rapidly faded away. Instead, a fierce light surged in their eyes. Calm down. The cultivator, who had been silent from the start, spoke up. The 4 people around him immediately quieted down. It was clear he was the leader. Without a doubt, this person should be the cultivator who occupied a spot to enter. The others were only his followers. The cultivator took a step forward and cupped his hands together. I am Feng Hong, from Fanqing Boundaries Feng family. I have no intention of making things difficult for fellow Taoist Chinyu. If you can withdraw on your own initiative today, the Feng family will surely repay you in the future. Chinyu shook his head without expression. Feng Hong wasn't willing. Fellow Taoist Chinyu, is there really no possibility? I don't wish to have a conflict with you. He had obtained secret information from his family. The Eastern Zhou family had once invited Grandmaster Zhou Bai to use the Great Prophecy art to determine Chinyu's background. Although he didn't know what the result was, not long after, the Eastern Zhou family confirmed Chinyu's spot as a follower. If that was all there was to it, it wouldn't necessarily mean anything. At most, it would indicate that there was no problem with his identity. But after that, Grandmaster Zhou Bai vanished from sight. The Eastern Zhou family announced that Grandmaster Zhou Bai had suffered some injuries and needed to recuperate for some time. This was worth pondering over. Although there was no evidence, it wasn't hard to guess that the Eastern Zhou family was deliberately hiding something. This was likely to involve Chinyu's true origins. Of the disciples of great families, there were certainly arrogant playboys, but there were even more of them who had been carefully raised from a young age. If they could avoid provoking enemies, they would avoid them as much as possible. In particular, if they couldn't figure out their background, it was likely they would be in great trouble. It was clear that Chinyu was such a person. Moreover, Feng Hong had another consideration. Even if he didn't care about Chinyu's background, there was no such thing as a great reputation. Since Chinyu was able to rush out of the God-confining gorge, how could he be easy to deal with? If they clashed with him, even if they won and seized this round platform, how could the 5 of them escape unscathed? It had to be known that in order to obtain an inheritance spot, 2 round platforms weren't enough. If there were casualties, how could they seize a 3rd round platform? Thus, unless it was absolutely necessary, Feng Hong didn't want to be enemies with Chinyu. If he could force Chinyu to retreat on his own initiative, that would naturally be the best choice. But it was clear that although his thoughts were good, they were doomed to fail. Chinyu lightly said, "If you don't dare to attack, then leave." Feng Hong's complexion sank. He took a deep breath and said, "If that's the case, then we will offend you. If we have offended you in any way, I ask fellow Taoist Chinyu to be magnanimous enough to forgive us." As his words fell, he lifted a hand and pressed forwards. Attack! Bang! There was an explosive sound in the void. It was like an invisible mountain had fallen down, causing the air to become thick and viscous like thick glue that wrapped around Yu. At the same time, his 4 followers erupted with their greatest strength without hesitation. Although they spoke with great momentum, as if they didn't place Yu in their eyes, none of them were idiots that could make it to this point. None of them dared to underestimate him. Since they attacked, they would naturally do their best to suppress Yu in a single move. With Feng Hong as the leader of the 5, their strength was without a doubt. If they joined forces, it could be seen just how terrifying they were. But Yu's expression remained calm. His eyes shined, revealing a bit of eagerness. After breaking into the divine realm, he hadn't used his full strength yet, but it should be enough to suppress the 5 people in front of him. Thinking this, Yu stood up and pointed a finger forward. Puff! There was a dull sound, like a sharp weapon piercing through a thick leather drum. The oppressive strength that flooded the world instantly vanished. Feng Hong's eyes widened, and he revealed a horrified expression, as if he had seen a ghost. It had to be known that the reason the Feng family was surnamed Feng wasn't because it was a bloodline inheritance. Rather, it was because a certain ancestor had reached large success in the Tao of Sealing. In order to inherit the invisible destiny of the world, they had changed their surname to Feng. Sealing arts were the most formidable methods of the Fengqing boundaries Feng family. What Feng Hong used just now was one of the fiercest of them all, drawing the world into a cage, imprisoning a cultivator within. The more time passed, the more solid the cage became, and the more tyrannical it became. But this didn't mean that the sealing art was weak at the start. On the contrary, it was still incomparably powerful. Otherwise, if someone broke free before the seal took effect, wouldn't that be a joke? With Feng Hong's current cultivation, if he attacked with all his strength, even a peak divine realm cultivator wouldn't be able to easily escape. But what did Yu do? He only lifted a hand and casually pointed a finger forward. During this process, Feng Hong wasn't even able to feel any fluctuations of strength. But the strength of this finger was able to tear apart the seal. It was simple and direct, as if it were nothing but rotten wood. This caused an icy fear to rise from the depths of his heart. Indeed, what corresponded to his reputation was his formidable strength. No, the strength that Yu revealed today was far more terrifying than the rumors made it out to be. He feared there was going to be trouble today. As Feng Hong's complexion became increasingly dignified, his heart shrank. Without warning, fear erupted from the depths of his heart. This is bad. With a scream in his heart, the jade ring on Feng Hong's left index finger suddenly exploded into pieces. It was like his head had been struck by a heavy hammer. His ears buzzed, and his mind spun. His vision darkened, and his vision darkened. Dark red blood flowed out from his mouth, nose, and ears, sliding down his face. He looked distressed and distressed. After a breath of time, Feng Hong's consciousness condensed once more. He immediately revealed an expression of fear and turned to flee without hesitation. Run! He didn't know what method Yu had used to launch this attack on him, but without a doubt, the terror of this attack was enough to take his life. If it weren't for the ring on his hand blocking the majority of the killing power in the critical moment, he feared he would already be lying on the ground. This Yu was too terrifying. Feng Hong didn't know why he was so terrifying, nor was he in the mood to find out the reason. He only knew one thing. If he didn't leave now, he feared he would have no choice but to stay here today. Feng Hong's reaction was extremely fast. After sensing danger, he fled without hesitation. But unfortunately, he was too late. It wasn't just because Yu was strong enough, but because from the moment he arrived here, he had become a chess piece in someone else's hands. Bang, 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 bang. The 4 followers that rushed towards Yu were sent flying backwards as if they had been slapped by an invisible hand. Their eyes widened in shock and disbelief. They couldn't imagine that even with the 5 of them joining forces, they still weren't Yu's match. It had to be known that he had just broken into the divine realm. So how could he be so strong? This was simply unreasonable. But reasoning was useless. Since they weren't Yu's match, they had to find a way to escape. At this time, a change occurred. One of the followers that was sent tumbling backwards suddenly stopped in midair. In the next moment, with a loud explosion, a terrifying aura erupted from his body. With the sound of crackling bones, this person's body suddenly grew. In the blink of an eye, he surpassed 30 feet. Because his skin couldn't withstand the rapidly expanding body, his flesh, blood, and bones began to tear apart. Immediately, blood gushed out. Billowing black gas gushed out from the cracks on his body, weaving together into a mass that covered his body. Only a pair of blood-red eyes stood out from the black gas. They released endless cruelty and destruction. Qin Yu frowned. He subconsciously held his breath. As he looked at this mass of black fog, a thick killing intent appeared in his eyes. In this boundless world, there were countless evil cultivation methods. For example, the demonic path had all sorts of horrifying transformations, but they were all common. But the person in front of him was different. When facing the great Tao plunderers and feeling their aura, any cultivator would instinctively feel a sense of disgust and rejection. But at this time, what Qin Yu felt was even more intense. It wasn't just disgust, but a killing intent that gushed out from the depths of his heart. This was a kind of rejection on the level of life. It was like two different life forms that couldn't coexist. Once they met, there was no need for any reason. Only by thoroughly destroying one side would things end. Qin Yu took a deep breath and suppressed his instinctive killing intent. He swept his eyes over Feng Hong and the others. They all had shocked expressions. It was clear they didn't know what was happening in front of them. Before Qin, you could observe them more. The complexions of Feng Hong and the others changed. They all revealed panic-stricken expressions. Damn it, what are you doing? Hurry up and stop. My strength. He is plundering my strength. Stop, you are crazy. If anything happens to me, you will die without a grave. Save me. Hurry and save me. The bodies of Feng Hong and the others withered at a speed visible to the naked eye. Their flesh and blood vanished, and the halos in their eyes vanished as well. Their blood essence and souls were all cleanly swallowed. After obtaining the strength of the four people, the mass of black fog wildly rose in volume. In the blink of an eye, it surpassed 1,000 feet. Suppressive gasps were accompanied by excited roars. What intoxicating taste! Flesh and blood beings should become food for my people. This is the mission and honor of your birth. Chua, the blood-red eye in the black fog locked onto Qin Yu. It chuckled and seemed to lick its tongue. Now, it is your turn. Qin Yu sucked in a deep breath. What are you? Humans are the most boring life form I have ever encountered, even though your taste is also the best. The blood-red eye in the black fog laughed. After death, everything becomes nothing. Why waste time caring about such irrelevant matters? Now, the only thing you should be doing is to howl in fear and despair. Bang! The black fog tumbled. Like a river bursting through a dam, black waves howled forth, rushing straight towards Qin Yu. Chapter 1008. Qin Yu's complexion changed. His heart violently shrank, and his heart began to race. He didn't know how terrifying the black mist in front of him was, but the warning signs in his heart were definitely there. He lifted a hand and pressed forward. 5-color divine light erupted, weaving together to form a 5-color vortex. Rumble, rumble. As it rapidly spun, a terrifying tearing strength was released, directly pulling in the surging black wave. With a crackling sound, the 5-color vortex began to corrode and break apart at a speed visible to the naked eye. After Qin Yu broke into the divine realm, the incomparably powerful 5-element, samsaric supernatural ability that possessed the power to suppress and defend, was incomparable to how it was in the past. He couldn't resist it at all. This wasn't an absolute suppression of strength. Rather, it was an absolute suppression of attributes, as if this black fog itself was the nemesis of all supernatural abilities. Jajage, it's useless. With your strength, it is impossible for you to contend with me. Just obediently wait for your death. Strange laughter echoed out from the black fog, revealing an irrepressible burning desire and greed. You could clearly sense that those blood-red eyes were locked onto him, as if they wished to swallow him whole. This fellow seemed to be confident in himself, as if he were already food placed on a plate. In truth, this wasn't a good feeling at all. Yu narrowed his eyes, a cold light flashing in their depths. He took a step forwards, and space suddenly shattered. Beneath the bombardment of a terrifying strength, ripples spread outwards, forming a tide of destruction that temporarily isolated the black fog from the five elements samsara. But at this time, Yu's complexion changed. Without hesitation, he lifted a hand and pointed a finger between his eyebrows. Where his fingertip fell, there was a loud cracking sound. But there was no blood. Instead, there was a mass of black smoke. This black smoke seemed to have a mind of its own. After sensing that it had been discovered, it rapidly stretched and turned into a large worm that drilled deeper into the flesh between Yu's eyebrows. Umph! With a cold cough, Yu pinched the tip of the black smoke. Wherever his fingertips touched, he felt a burning pain. Come out! With a loud roar, he pulled backwards, and the black smoke was pulled out from his body. With a shrill cry, it turned into a ghostly face that rushed at him. Within Yu's soul space, the sun and moon force field suddenly stirred up a fluctuation that swept outwards. The ghostly face formed from black smoke that rushed toward Yu shattered and vanished without a trace. On the other side, a groan came out from the black mist. It was obvious that the destruction of the ghost face mask had affected him. Those blood-red eyes locked onto Yu. Although they still revealed naked greed and bloodthirstiness, there was now a bit more caution. If Yu could destroy his divine avatar, that proved that there was something on Yu's body that could threaten him. But that's even better. The human cultivators, they killed the stronger the warrior, the more rewards he would receive from the abyss. An abyssal species. In Yu's mind, the little blue lamp's consciousness suddenly fluctuated. In the next moment, somewhere in his soul space collapsed inwards, and the phantom of a great sun appeared. It had been a long time since the little blue lamp's projection had descended. During this long period of time, it had remained silent. Today, Yu could feel the disgust and dread it revealed, as well as a deep sense of vigilance. This was the first time Yu had felt such emotions from it, as if the abyssal species that the little blue lamp spoke of could pose a threat to it. Thinking of this, Yu's heart chilled. Looking at the entire world, he was absolutely one of the people that understood the existence of the little blue lamp the most. He naturally knew that it could turn the rotten into the miraculous, and that it was inconceivable to the extreme. If even the little blue lamp had such misgivings, then this abyssal species must be extremely terrifying. As if sensing Yu's thoughts, the little blue lamp's consciousness fluctuated once more. It isn't just terrifying, but extremely terrifying. It seems that after that incident in the past, there were some changes in the Great Desolate. There are actually abyssal species that escaped. Don't ask too much. There are some things I cannot tell you right now, but there is one thing you must remember. No matter when or where, as long as you encounter an abyssal species, do not hesitate to kill it at all costs. Yu furrowed his eyebrows. I don't need to ask, but killing this thing isn't easy. At the very least, my strength is restrained by it. The little blue lamp said, the abyssal demonic energy of an abyssal species naturally restrains the strength of all flesh and blood beings. But you're no longer at the level of an ordinary flesh and blood being, so killing it isn't difficult at all. The fluctuations of the sun and moon force field can temporarily protect you from the damage of the abyssal demonic energy. The strength of the jade embryo egg is condensed from the great Tao of the heavens and earth. You only need a single strike to kill an abyssal species of this level. But there is one thing you must remember. You must act quickly and ensure that you kill it in a single strike. Otherwise, if this abyssal species escapes, you will soon be surrounded by the entire abyssal race. Believe me, at that time, no one will be able to protect you. Not even me. Yu's heart chilled. His intuition told him that there was a great secret hidden within the little blue lamp's words. But now clearly wasn't the time to think about these things. Feeling the fading projection of the little blue lamp in his soul space, Chinyu took a deep breath and suppressed these thoughts. This fellow, the little blue lamp, was definitely hiding from something. Could it be that it had some terrifying enemy to begin with? No matter what, he would kill this abyssal species first. With this thought in mind, a sharp light flashed deep in Chinyu's eyes. Shwa, he took a step forwards, brazenly rushing into the surging black fog. This scene clearly surpassed the abyssal species' expectations. After a moment of daze, it couldn't help but laugh out loud. I originally thought that I would have to waste some effort to kill you, but I never thought you would be so stupid as to come here on your own initiative to die. After entering my abyssal demonic energy, even if you have transcendent abilities, your only fate is to be rotted into a puddle of blood and your soul disintegrated. Bang! The abyssal demonic energy wildly tumbled about. It was like a rapidly wriggling digestive organ, wanting to thoroughly absorb Chinyu. But the development of events was clearly different from what the abyssal species thought. Chinyu didn't die from corrosion. Instead, he was like a giant fish that swam against the current of the abyssal demonic energy straight towards its main body. Hum, hum, within his soul space, the rising purple moon and setting blue sun gently trembled, causing the entire sun and moon force field to shake with them. These vibrations formed waves that wrapped around Chinyu, completely repelling all of the abyssal demonic energy that had been attracted by his flesh and blood aura. In order to kill him in a single strike, closing the distance between them was certainly the best method. At the very least, even if an accident occurred, there was still a chance to salvage the situation. Wrapped in layers of abyssal demonic energy, the abyssal species' body swelled to around 40 feet. Its flesh and blood were as hard as rock. Its eyes were blood red. It frowned and then sneered. Trying to kill him at close range? Ha! The abyssal races had been corroded by abyssal demonic energy for generations. In the process of inheriting their bloodline, they had already tempered their incomparably formidable mortal bodies. In terms of bodily strength alone, even the incomparably powerful ancient race bloodline could only barely compare with the abyssal species. In the eyes of this abyssal species, wanting to kill him at close range was no different from sending itself to death. Bang! The abyssal species took the initiative to greet Chinyu. Its mouth cracked open, revealing an icy cold grin. The closer Chinyu approached, the richer the aura of the abyssal species became. At the same time, Chinyu couldn't suppress the violent killing intent in his heart. This caused the blood vessels on the surface of his eyes to swell up. Because they were filled with blood, there was even a hint of madness in them. Flesh and blood life forms and abyssal species were like two completely opposite races. There was no possibility of reconciliation between the two sides. From the first day they met, it was destined that only when one side completely disappeared would the bloody slaughter between the races come to an end. The figure of the abyssal species appeared in front of Chinyu. It strode forwards, the surrounding abyssal demonic energy tumbling around it as it moved, its momentum dreadful. Jajage, human cultivator, since you seek death on your own initiative, then let me help you. Bang! The abyssal species violently exploded. It instantly vanished from sight, fusing into one with the surrounding abyssal demonic energy. The abyssal demonic energy, it was the abyssal demonic energy. This was an ability unique to abyssal species. It could hide itself and give its opponent an invisible fatal strike. Chapter 1009. Chinyu's complexion changed, anger in his eyes. He didn't expect to encounter such a situation. At this time, there was a diabolical laugh in his ears. A billowing wave of abyssal demon energy swept towards him. At the same time, Chinyu turned around. Without hesitation, He lifted a hand and slammed it down behind him. His finger was like lightning, decisive and decisive, without the least bit of hesitation. Where his fingertip fell, the abyssal demon energy froze, as if it had been frozen by a terrifyingly low temperature. The abyssal creature that had vanished from sight slowly reappeared. Now, one could clearly see that Qin Yu's finger had fallen between the creature's eyebrows. The fingertip tore through the creature's flesh and blood, and a section had sunk in. You are actually... The abyssal creature's eyes widened, filled with shock and despair. It could already feel that its life force had been severed. No, I cannot die like this. I have to send back information about him. Like the final radiance of a setting sun, the abyssal creature's body suddenly ignited with flames. These flames were the same as the abyssal demon energy. They were pure black. Qin Yu's eyes flashed with a cold light. Give up. I will not give you any chance. The finger that had sunk into the creature's eyebrows suddenly pressed down. His entire finger pierced into the creature's head. Without needing to activate it, the strength of the jade embryo egg erupted on its own. It swept through every inch of the abyssal creature's body like a hurricane, crushing its flesh and blood and extinguishing its life force. On the abyssal creature's body, the black flames that had just appeared were quickly extinguished. In the next moment, its entire body turned to ash and dissipated. The billowing abyssal demon energy quickly dissipated, as if everything that had just happened had been an illusion that had never appeared. They had won the first battle. Eastern Zhou jolly revealed a faint smile. With the combined strength of the five of them, they hadn't paid too great a price to seize a round platform. If they seize another one, they could smoothly obtain an inheritance spot and truly have the qualifications to obtain the unsurpassed good fortune of the myriad soul Tao. Fellow Taoists, we will immediately rest. Once we've recovered, I will guard this round platform, and you can continue to seize the third one. In order to welcome the opening of the myriad soul Tao, the Eastern Zhou family had made ample preparations. Eastern Zhou Jolly had an incomparably powerful trump card in her hands. It was a set of formation that he had spent a lot of money to buy. Its defensive power was so strong that even an original God Realm cultivator couldn't break it in a short time. Once it was activated, it would be enough to protect the round platform for a certain period of time. As for the value of the array disc itself, as long as he could obtain a place in the inheritance, not to mention a mere set of array discs, even if it was 10 or 100 sets, so what? Everything progressed much more smoothly than expected. But East Zhou Jili was well aware that this was all because of Qin Yu's existence. If it wasn't for him guarding alone, they wouldn't have been able to send 5 people to seize the other round platforms. Xia Chun, Wan Ruoxian, and Taoist Nun Taiping all had smiles on their faces. They were only one round platform away from completing the contract, and then they would be able to fight for their own good fortune. Over the countless years, there were many who entered the myriad soul path as followers. In the end, there were many who gained something. They might still have a chance. As Shang Lingyue smiled, there was a deeply hidden trace of relaxation in the depths of his eyes. Luckily, they had already smoothly seized the second round platform. Even if Qin Yu was killed, they could still stay here and not fail. Looking at the time, they should have already made their move. As for whether or not Qin Yu could resist, that was the lord with a pure bloodline. Not only was he incomparably strong, but he was also the natural nemesis of all flesh and blood beings. Unless one's strength reached the limit, and they were existences that transcended the world, only then would they be able to contend with the Lord. Although Qin Yu was strong, he was still far from that boundary, so it was impossible for him to accomplish this. Soon, Qin Yu would be killed by the Lord, and because of this, he would obtain a reward. He hoped that he could obtain several drops of God blood this time, and further change his bloodline. At that time, he would be able to become even more powerful. Shang Lingyue sat down with everyone, but he didn't cultivate. Instead, he suppressed the excitement in his heart and waited for the signal that Qin Yu had been killed. Moments later, there was a stuffy cough on the round platform. East Zhou Jili and the others opened their eyes to see Shang Lingwei spit out a mouthful of blood. His face paled and his body shivered. His eyes were wide open, filled with shock and disbelief. "Brother Shang, how are you?" East Zhou Jili's complexion changed. She hurriedly stood up, a look of concern on her face. If one were to say that there was a deep friendship between her and Shang Lingwei, that naturally didn't exist. But even if you really want to spit out blood, at least hold on until you help me seize the third stone platform. I still need you now. Although her words were a bit cold, it was clear that this was the truth. It had to be said that this Shang Lingwei was indeed a character. His mind was shaken by this sudden change, but he soon suppressed his emotions. He looked up and squeezed out a smile on his pale face. "It's nothing. Just now, when I was fighting with someone, I gained some insights. I wanted to try and see if I could make a breakthrough, but I didn't expect something to go wrong. Everyone, don't worry, I'm fine. I will recover soon." It was clear that he understood everyone's concern for him and where the main point was. A fairy's eyes flashed. "Fellow Taoist Shang, I cultivate a secret technique that can speed up the recovery of injuries. Perhaps it can help you." She faintly smiled, filled with charm. "After all, you and I are bound together. I also hope that you can recover as soon as possible." Shang Lingwei shook his head. "Thank you for Fairy Wan's good intentions, but the peach source art that I cultivate cannot be taught to outsiders. It will be difficult for others to investigate it." He took a deep breath. "Everyone, rest assured that I will soon stabilize my injuries and won't drag everyone down." Seeing his firm attitude and calm tone, as if there really weren't any problems, Eastern Zhou Chali nodded. "Then, Brother Shang, hurry up and cultivate. If there is anything you need help with, please feel free to ask." Shang Lingwei closed his eyes. He could no longer conceal the tumultuous waves in his heart. They turned into billowing waves that tumbled in his mind. That lord had died. How was this possible? It had to be known that he was an existence that descended from the abyss and possessed a pure bloodline. If it weren't for the fact that he was worried that killing too much would arouse the suspicions of the outside world, he would have been able to kill off all the cultivators of the myriad soul path by himself. After all, the abyssal species had an innate ability to restrain flesh and blood beings. Shang Lingwei was well aware of just how terrifying this was. However, even under such circumstances, his life mark had been completely extinguished. There was absolutely no mistake about this. Was it Xinyu who killed him? That was impossible. No matter how deep his background was, it was impossible for him to accomplish this. For flesh and blood beings to kill that lord, they needed a strength that surpassed the limits of the world. It was impossible for such an existence to descend into the myriad soul path. Otherwise, after so many years, it was impossible for the actions of the abyss to remain undetected. Damn it, just what went wrong? Shang Lingwei's heart trembled. He couldn't find the possibility that that lord had been killed, but there was one thing that was beyond doubt. If a pure blood lord perished, as the information provider, he would inevitably be implicated. Just thinking about it made him feel as if he had fallen into an icy lake. What should I do? Damn it. How could things turn out like this? I can't panic. I have to think of a way to remedy this situation. At the very least, I have to find out who killed that lord. If I can kill him, perhaps I can make up for my mistakes. As Shang Lingwei was panicking, an icy cold aura suddenly arrived within his body. Schwa. Without any strength to resist, Shang Lingwei's consciousness was instantly pulled into his mind world. The skies were pitch black. Strong winds howled and endless demonic energy tumbled about. One could faintly make out a terrifying mountain-like figure. He stood between the heavens and earth like a demon god from the legends. His bloodthirsty eyes landed on Shang Lingwei. "Obtain enough power and become a vessel for me to descend. This is your only chance to atone for your sins." For hours later, Shang Lingwei opened his eyes. Although his complexion was still pale, his aura had stabilized. He stood up and said, "I apologize for making everyone wait for so long. My condition is fine, and I can leave at any time." Amazement flashed in Eastern Zhou Jili's eyes. This person was truly worthy of being a disciple from the peach blossom spring. His methods were extraordinary. Even though Shang Lingwei appeared to be very calm earlier, Dongzhou Zhili could still roughly sense the severity of his injuries. In such a short period of time, he had recovered. If she didn't see this with her own eyes, she would have found it hard to believe. But to her, this was clearly good news. Shang Lingwei had recovered from his injuries. If the four of them joined forces, their chances of seizing the third-round platform will be much higher. Fellow Taoist Shang is truly skilled. It looks like I was meddlesome before. Wan Ruoxian gently sighed. She blinked her large eyes, constantly looking around. Shang Lingwei faintly smiled. Fairy Wan's words are too serious. I will remember your good intentions in my heart. Wan Ruoxian's eyes brightened. Remember those words. The two of them glanced at each other. Their thoughts raced, and they didn't continue talking. After living for a long time, one's experience would naturally increase. Towards these things in front of them, they could basically turn a blind eye to them. At most, they would think that this Shang boy wasn't weak, but his eyesight was a bit lacking. Moreover, what sort of background did Wan Ruoxian have? If someone dared to have any thoughts about her, they were probably tired of living. Eastern Zhou jelly furrowed her eyebrows. But in the current situation, it wasn't good for her to say anything. They didn't have the chance to do anything now. As for the future, if Shang Lingwei was smart enough, he would wake up and know when to stop. Otherwise, she wouldn't care if he sought death. Suppressing her thoughts, she swept her eyes over the four people and solemnly bowed. Everyone, I will have to trouble you all with the third-round platform. If we succeed, besides the agreement in the contract, I will also have an additional congratulatory gift. Fourth Miss, rest assured, we will do our best. Fourth Miss, please wait for the good news. We will naturally do our best. Whoosh, whoosh. After bowing, the four people turned and left, howling towards the agreed location. Chapter 10:10. Qin Yu furrowed his eyebrows, a bit of surprise on his face. At this time, between the heavens and earth, an invisible strength was slowly fusing into his body like a spring rain. After his soul and body absorbed this strength, they began to rapidly rise. This was a gift from the world itself. Qin Yu never imagined that after killing an abyssal life form, he would obtain such a harvest. What was the reason? The reason is that you killed an abyssal life form. The stone pagoda's thoughts suddenly fluctuated. This was the first time it had spoken of its own initiative since it was forced to acknowledge Qin Yu as its master. However, these words were indeed lacking in skill. Qin Yu rolled his eyes. What was the difference between this and not saying anything? However, this wasn't the main point. The main point was that this stone pagoda fellow seemed to know something. With a light cough, Qin Yu said, "Be more specific." The stone pagoda didn't reveal a shocked expression because of Qin Yu's attitude. After a brief silence, it slowly said, "With your cultivation level, you don't have the qualifications to come into contact with these things. But since you have become my master, you'll have to face them sooner or later. The abyss is the greatest terror of this world. Or, to be more precise, it is a terrifying existence that humanity and even the entire world of flesh and blood have yet to clearly explore. But, without a doubt, it possesses the ability to destroy the entire world." Without waiting for Qin Yu to urge it, it continued to say, "Many, many years ago, so long ago that even I don't know the exact date, a channel suddenly appeared and countless terrifying life forms gushed out from it. They controlled some sort of demonic energy and naturally possessed the ability to restrain flesh and blood life. That was a calamity that was submerged in time. Trillions of lives were annihilated in that slaughter. You might not dare to believe it, but the world you see now is one that was born after that calamity. As for the world before, it wasn't like this at all. Of course, I cannot tell you too much right now. Otherwise, karma will be involved, and that will only be harmful to you. In short, what that channel connected to was the endless abyss. And those that rushed into the world and caused a monstrous calamity, even nearly destroying the entire world of flesh and blood life, were abyssal life forms. They are born to be the natural enemies of all flesh and blood life forms. You should have already experienced this. When facing abyssal life forms, any flesh and blood life form will instinctively want to kill and completely destroy them. This isn't just because of the natural opposition between the two existences, but because this is the world itself, an instinct that is branded into the souls of all life forms. Because what the abyss wants to destroy is not only the entire flesh and blood race, but also the world itself. Perhaps this is a bit general, but the basic concept is correct, and it will allow you to better understand. So, when you kill an abyssal life form, you will obtain a gift from the heavens and the earth. This is the reward that you deserve. Of yours. As the stone pagoda spoke these words, there was a slight fluctuation in its heart. This was because it was well aware of just how terrifying abyssal creatures were. With Qin Yu's cultivation, he wouldn't even be able to withstand a single blow. But of Qin you had in Qin, and you had SS, and he, Qin, and he, and, of it, and and had it, and had, had. It was and. Although it didn't want to bear the burden, the responsibility was there. Since it had survived, it wanted to avenge its old friends. All abyssal creatures deserve to die. Qin Yu could sense that beneath the stone pagoda's calm narration, there were hidden fluctuations of emotions that were suppressed to the extreme. Although everything it said sounded inconceivable and a bit absurd, his intuition told him that these matters he hadn't yet touched upon had truly occurred in the incomparably long past. The abyss, just what exactly was it? It was actually so terrifying that it almost destroyed an entire race of flesh and blood creatures. It had to be known that the so-called flesh and blood beings encompassed nearly all existences that Qin Yu had come into contact with. For example, he had met the master of the Peach Blossom Spring once. She was so strong that Shui Zheng, a warrior at the original God Realm, had to kneel and lick him. Such an existence was still so weak in the face of the abyss. If that was the case, how did the world survive? As Qin Yu's thoughts raced, he seemed to have realized something. The stone pagoda's thoughts fluctuated, and it bitterly smiled. No one knows what the abyss is. Even in the ancient texts of the past, there are only some vague and ambiguous records. But right now, what you should be paying attention to isn't the origin of the abyss, but this myriad soul Tao that is connected to the abyss. This channel is suppressed and sealed. Why would a pure-blooded abyssal creature appear here? The stone pagoda paused for a moment, its tone becoming increasingly heavy. Perhaps what my master said in the past was right. The existence of the myriad soul Tao itself has a great problem. Qin Yu's eyes brightened. The reason he appeared here wasn't for the so-called inheritance of the myriad soul Tao. What he wanted to find was the secrets of the myriad soul Tao. Now, it seemed he could obtain some information from the stone pagoda. What do you know? The stone pagoda said. My master only raised his suspicions. He didn't say much about the myriad soul Tao. After all, the person who founded this place was an existence that stood at the peak of the world. Without concrete evidence, he couldn't casually question him. Moreover, he established the myriad soul Tao with good intentions. He hoped that the lineage of flesh and blood beings could open a path to the transcendent great Tao and thoroughly resolve the threat of the abyss. But now, it seems that there really is a problem with the myriad soul Tao. What we need to do now is to find the source of this problem. Qin Yu, this process might be dangerous, but as a member of the human race, since you encountered this matter, you absolutely cannot withdraw. This is a mission that you should shoulder, even if you die in the end. Qin Yu, he never imagined that the stone pagoda would say such righteous words. He felt that this scene was far too strange. Moreover, something didn't seem right. Why was he the only one mentioned from start to finish? I would rather die than find out the reason. What about you? After thinking for a moment, Qin Yu asked this question. The stone pagoda sighed. There are fewer and fewer people who know about what happened in the past. I have to live on and let future generations know what sort of terrifying threat our world is facing. So, no matter what, I must live on. No matter how painful and torturous it is, I must persist until the end of time. Even if I have to endure endless loneliness, so what? Besides the stone pagoda, Qin Yu couldn't think of anyone else who would be so thick-skinned. However, Qin Yu had no intention of exposing it. In any case, his goal was to find the true secrets of the myriad-souled Tao to begin with and find a way to unravel it. No matter how dangerous the process was, this wouldn't change. If so, then what was the point of wasting his breath on it? As for truly encountering danger, they were all in the same boat. If he encountered trouble, did the stone pagoda think it could stay out of it? Don't be too naive, At this time, Qin Yu's thoughts stirred. Through their contract, he could feel the fluctuations transmitted over. He had obtained the second round platform. Now he only lacked the last round platform to complete the contents of the contract. Once East Zhou Jolly obtained an inheritance spot, they would be able to move freely. This was the content of a follower's contract that he had to fulfill. Even though the East Zhou family had modified the contract to the most lenient degree, it was impossible to change this. However, just as East Zhou Jolly and the others left, he was immediately ambushed. Moreover, there was a terrifyingly strong abyssal life form hidden within. Was this really just a coincidence? Or was there some other secret behind this? Qin Yu looked up in the direction that East Zhou Jolly and the others left in. A cold light flashed in his eyes. After the current myriad-soul Tao was completely opened, it could be said that it was no different from a true world. This was because, in his perception, the mountains and rivers in front of him were all real existences. After leaving East Zhou Jolly to guard the second round platform, Shang Lingyue's group of 4 were hurrying along, searching for traces of the third round platform. But their luck wasn't too good. They spent a great deal of time in this direction, but still didn't find anything. Qin Yu and East Zhou Jolly each guarded a round platform. Although they knew that these two had their own methods, it was still somewhat risky. The longer they waited, the more likely there would be problems. They were only one round platform away from completing the contract, so no one was willing to cause any problems. As they moved forwards, Shang Lingyue suddenly said, "Everyone, how about we split up and search in 2 different directions? Once we find a round platform, we can send a message through the contract." He looked at Immortal Beauty. "Fairy Maiden, are you willing to come with me?" Immortal Beauty covered her mouth and smiled. "Of course, I would be more than happy to." Xia Chun and Taoist Nun Taiping both frowned. They swept their eyes over the two and nodded after a moment of hesitation. That's fine too. They thought that although these two were exchanging flirtatious glances with each other, given the current situation, they shouldn't be unable to control themselves and something would happen. If they split up, their speed would be halved. Whoosh, whoosh, the 4 people split up, howling in 2 different directions. Immortal Beauty glanced at Shang Lingyue. Suddenly, she felt a bit sour on her face. She couldn't help but squeeze her thighs together. She smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist Shang's injuries have really healed. If there is a need, I can lend you a hand." Shang Lingyue looked into her eyes. "I won't hide it from Fairy Maiden, but I am indeed feeling a bit unwell. How about we temporarily stop searching and help me diagnose and treat my injuries?" Immortal Beauty was startled. She was just trying to find an opportunity to tease him a bit, but she never imagined that Shang Lingyue would take advantage of the situation. Looking at his eyes, there seemed to be something wrong. Did he really want something to happen between them right now? Of course she didn't mind. Even if they did it 100 more times, it wouldn't be a problem. But the key problem was that the current situation wasn't suitable. But it seemed that Shang Lingyue was in a hurry. Without giving her time to hesitate, he turned and flew towards the ground. Immortal Beauty bit her lips. "Do you think I'm afraid of you?" She twisted her waist and followed after him. Shang Lingyue flicked his sleeves, and an invisible strength shot into the mountain, directly opening up a simple cave. He smiled at immortal beauty and walked in. Now she could confirm that this boy was really impatient. She secretly despised him. The so-called disciples of the Peach Blossom Spring were only SOSO. At the same time, she was also proud of her own charm. She was indeed very popular. Her face blushed red, and her eyes shined with a seductive light. She walked into the cave, thinking that she would definitely urge this boy to hurry up. After all, now wasn't the time to enjoy himself. But although she thought this, she felt the sourness in her body deepen. She couldn't help but clamp her thighs together even tighter, feeling hot and humid. Fellow Taoist Shang, where do you feel uncomfortable? Let me help you. Before she finished speaking, she was pulled into his arms. Feeling the scent of a man rushing towards her, immortal beauty's eyes nearly overflowed with seduction. This boy was really impatient. She closed her eyes, waiting to enjoy the pleasure. But she didn't notice that in the darkness, Shang Lingyue's hands were groping her body. His eyes were cold, filled with indifference. "Ah, you're hurting me. Shang Lingyue, what are you doing? Ah, you're crazy. Hurry and let go of me. Save me. Who are you? What are you? Save me." Screams of panic and despair came from the cave. Black fog roiled and churned, concealing the two figures that were stacked together. But now, she couldn't feel any ambiguous or lingering feelings at all. All she felt was an icy cold fear that pierced straight in her heart. Roar! A suppressed roar came from the cave. The tumbling black fog howled back into Shang Lingyue's body. In his arms was a withered corpse that seemed to have been buried underground for countless years. It emitted a thick aura of decay. He let go and allowed the corpse to fall to the ground. He didn't even look at this beautiful woman who was still alive not too long ago. He closed his eyes, an intoxicated expression on his face. This feeling was something he hadn't experienced in a long time. But now wasn't the time for him to be immersed in it. Taking a deep breath, Shang Lingyue half knelt on the ground. He lifted a hand and pierced his forehead, allowing blood to flow out. What was strange was that the blood that flowed out didn't casually drip down. Rather, it spread across his face, drawing the outline of a blooming flower. "Incomparably respected Lord, your humble servant is willing to become your vessel. I beg for your noble will to descend upon me." As he whispered to himself, there was a deep explosive sound that came from within Shang Lingyue's body. His face twisted, and he revealed a pained expression. On his twisted face, the flower drawn by blood had now bloomed, releasing an incomparably demonic aura. "Ah!" As he cried out in pain, Shang Lingyue's pupils rapidly dilated. Finally, darkness invaded his eyes. After a moment, his trembling body slowly stopped. He straightened his body, and the darkness in his eyes faded away, returning to normal. However, his pupils had become exceptionally dark, as if they were connected to a terrifying bottomless abyss. Sweeping his eyes over the corpse on the ground, Shang Lingyue's figure flickered, and he left the cave. He looked up. His gaze seemed to cross through the barriers of space and fall on some existence in the distance. Indifferent and icy cold eyes gradually revealed respect. He lowered his head and knelt to the ground, respectfully saying, "My lord, I've come." Chapter 10:11. Shang Lingyue knelt on the ground. After a long time, he stood up. His deep and dark eyes revealed a thoughtful look. After searching through his memories, he already knew who it was that killed the person with the abyssal bloodline. But Wu Gang wasn't some nameless nobody. If Qin Yu could kill him, then he must have some cards in his hand. Of course, cards were cards, and he didn't fear them. He also had absolute confidence he could kill this human cultivator. But if he were to be injured during this process, he feared it would affect what he planned to do next. He couldn't lose the greater good for the greater good. Since he knew Qin Yu's identity, there was no way he could escape. It was just a matter of time. With this thought in mind, Shang Lingyue stepped forwards and howled away. An hour later, Through the sign-follower contract, a fluctuation of information spread out. On the round platform, East Zhou Jilly opened her eyes, a look of pleasant surprise on her face. The third round platform was in her hands. Without hesitation, she stood up and galvanized the marks within her that belonged to the myriad soul Tao. Qin Yu's eyes flashed open. He looked down at the round platform beneath him that suddenly began to tremble. In the next moment, he and the round platform beneath him vanished from sight. Everything in front of him fell into darkness, and a deathly silence filled his ears. There was no sound at all, as if he were isolated from the world. Luckily, this process only lasted for a short period of time. After 4 breaths of time, light bloomed in front of Qin Yu. Squinting his eyes, he saw Dongzhou Jieli, who was smiling from ear to ear. Her slightly flushed face was filled with surprise. Shwa, shwa. Space twisted around him, and 3 more figures appeared. When one of the 3 was chosen and East Zhou Jieli obtained an inheritance spot through the signed contract, they would automatically gather together. At this time, Qin Yu stiffened. His heart fiercely shrank, and fear gushed out like a tide. This feeling was an abyssal life form. Compared to the abyssal life form he killed before, the strength of the 2 sides was on a completely different level. Qin Yu took a deep breath and forced himself to remain calm. He calmly looked over. Their gazes met in midair. Shang Lingyue smiled and nodded, his face warm and genial. His pure appearance hadn't changed at all. It was him. Qin Yu nodded in return, but his heart sank deep into his chest. Before this, he had suspected that there was another reason for the sudden attack of the abyssal life form. But he never imagined that Shang Lingyue's body had already been occupied by an abyssal life form. He was a victim? Or perhaps this matter itself was inextricably linked to him. Qin Yu's thoughts raced. Then he bitterly smiled. In this situation, there was no meaning in thinking about these things. What he should be thinking about was how to survive. The abyssal creature that occupied Shang Lingyue's body hadn't revealed its fierce claws yet, but its terrifying might was beyond doubt. Qin Yu since told him that if the 2 sides truly fought, he had no chance of winning. But now, Shang Lingyu didn't make a move. With his strength, it wouldn't be difficult for him to exterminate the people present today. Moreover, he had personally killed an abyssal creature not too long ago, so there was definitely a blood feud between them. Although he didn't understand why Shang Lingyue would patiently endure, he knew that this was his only chance to survive this danger. Regardless of the reason, since you want to pretend to be harmless, I'll pretend to be confused as well. As long as you don't turn hostile and start a fight, it's fine. Where is fellow Taoist Wan Ruoxian? Eastern Zhou jolly frowned. Xia Chun and Taoist priestess Taiping's complexions changed. In order to increase our efficiency, we split into 2 teams to search for the other round platforms. Fellow Taoist Shang and Wan Ruoxian were together. Seeing that everyone was looking at him, Shang Lingyue revealed a bitter and guilty expression. Not long after we parted ways with the 2 fellow Taoists, I and Fairy Wan found a round platform. Unexpectedly, before we could inform the 2 of you, we were discovered by the other party. In the battle, Fairy Wan fell into the other side's trap and eventually died. But she also dragged 2 of them down with her. Because of this, I was able to kill the last enemy and obtain the 3rd round platform. So that's how it is. Eastern Zhou jolly revealed a moved expression. She didn't doubt Shang Lingyue's explanation. After a moment of silence, she said, fellow Taoist Wan Ruoxian died because of the myriad soul Tao. The Eastern Zhou family will surely provide generous compensation to her family and friends. Xia Chun and Taoist priestess Taiping slowly nodded. Although they didn't think much of Wan Ruoxian, they still felt a little sad for her. After all, in the myriad soul Tao, in a strict sense, both sides were seeking lucky chances and were people of the same race. They didn't doubt Shang Lingyue's words. One of the reasons was that both sides were equal in strength, but another reason was that Shang Lingyue had obtained the 3rd round platform. In such a short period of time, it was impossible for too many things to have happened, of course, The most important reason was that the contract between the three round platforms had been completed and Juan Ruashian had died. In this sort of situation, there was no need for them to open their eyes and investigate further. Qin nodded along with everyone. A heavy expression appeared on his face. He glanced at Shang Lingyue from the corner of his eyes. If this matter had nothing to do with him, he would kill himself with a piece of tofu. However, Juan Ruashian was nothing more than a passerby. Moreover, it was likely that she even had thoughts of seducing him so that she could pluck him. If such a woman died, then so be it. Moreover, if it weren't for her taking the initiative to approach him, she wouldn't have ended up in such a state so quickly. This was what they meant by bringing disaster upon oneself. East Zhou Jelly's eyes paused on Qinyu for a moment. She said in a low voice, "For friends, I have obtained an inheritance spot and will soon enter the land of inheritance. From this moment on, our contract ends. Here, I wish you all a smooth journey and that you will all have a good harvest." After she finished speaking, her thoughts stirred and the binding strength of the contract between the two sides immediately vanished. Qinyu's heart twitched. He thought, why did you move so quickly? What if Shang Lingyue didn't do anything because he was worried about the contract? If you did something like this, you might be the one to die. Although Qinyu remained calm on the surface, he had already prepared himself to flee at any moment. But soon, he discovered that he was overthinking things. Shang Lingyue was the first to cup his hands together. "Everyone, I bid my farewells here. I hope that we will meet again in the future." He turned and left, vanishing from sight in the blink of an eye. Xiachun and Taoist Nun Taiping both revealed looks of joy. "East Zhou Jieli, the two of us will also bid our farewells." Whoosh, whoosh, the two of them flew off in another direction. It was as if they had reached some sort of agreement while searching for the round platform. Only Qinyu and East Zhou Jieli were left behind. After confirming that Shang Lingyue had truly left and wasn't hiding in the shadows to ambush them, Qinyu slowly let out a breath, a trace of doubt in his eyes. An incomparably powerful abyssal creature had actually given up a chance to take revenge for its own kind. Moreover, according to the information he obtained, flesh and blood beings were extremely delicious food to abyssal creatures. In other words, Qinyu, East Zhou Jieli, and the others standing in front of Shang Lingyue were plates of delicious food. He was actually able to endure it. There was definitely some inside story behind this. Before Qinyu could think any further, East Zhou Jieli hesitated for a moment. She said, "Qinyu, what do you plan on doing next?" Qinyu glanced at her and cupped his hands together. "I have some private matters to deal with. I wish, East Zhou Jieli, that you will have a great harvest in the land of inheritance. Farewell." He turned and left without the slightest hesitation. There wasn't even the slightest bit of reluctance in his heart. Okay? East Zhou Jieli inwardly mocked herself. She really had overthought things. It was likely that from the very start, Qinyu had chosen to follow her because of his own personal reasons. There were no other factors at all in his decision. How laughable! She had actually been influenced by the outside world and let her imagination run wild. East Zhou Jieli laughed at herself and restrained her thoughts, anticipation shining deep in her eyes. She had already obtained a spot for the inheritance. This was the most important matter right now. Compared to this, the so-called feelings of love weren't anything at all. With a thought, she galvanized the completed inheritance mark within her body. Then, East Zhou Jieli vanished from sight. Qinyu raced forwards, increasing his speed to the maximum. After 2 hours, he carefully sensed his surroundings and didn't find anything wrong. Only then did he let out a sigh of relief. No matter why Shang Lingyue hadn't attacked, this was clearly a good thing for Qinyu. Otherwise, he might have already been chewed up and swallowed into his stomach. This wasn't because he didn't have confidence in his own strength. Rather, the stronger he was, the more he could clearly sense the disparity between them. Just because he hadn't done anything before didn't mean he wouldn't in the future. The arrival of such a terrifyingly strong abyssal life form from the myriad soul Tao was like a sword hanging over his head, one that could cut down at any moment. Thinking of this, he subconsciously frowned. Cough. Chinyu, I've thought about it. As the saying goes, where there's life, there's hope. As long as you leave this place and spread the news of an abyssal life form arriving in the myriad soul Tao, it will naturally draw attention and they will investigate this matter. The stone pagoda's consciousness fluctuated. So, leaving now might not be a bad choice. Haha, where was all the righteousness and righteousness from before? Now that he sensed danger, he wanted to shrink his neck back. He really wasn't afraid of losing face. Towards the stone pagoda's thick skin, Chinyu only wanted to say a single word. But entering the myriad soul Tao this time was his only chance to find a way to rescue Ningling. He absolutely could not miss this chance. As for that abyssal life form, he would take it one step at a time, until things reached the end. Who could come to a conclusion? Perhaps there would be another favorable turn. Chinyu took a deep breath and suppressed his tumbling thoughts. He looked up, determined his direction, and then held away. Hey, you need to think this through. If you continue forward, there's a chance that problems will occur. Chinyu, how about you cancel our previous contract first? That way, I might be able to take revenge for you in the future. Speak. Don't pretend to be mute. I know you can hear me. Big brother. Can I call you Big Brother? This abyssal life form is extremely terrifying, and you are absolutely not its match. If you go up there, you will only be seeking death. Chinyu's lips twitched. He thought that he had underestimated the thickness of this stone pagoda skin. With a thought, he severed his connection with the stone pagoda, completely blocking out the pagoda's sorrowful cries. Half a day later, after avoiding several groups of cultivators, Chinyu saw 3 towering mountains that towered into the heavens. He had finally arrived. After completing the contract, if one wished to enter the land of inheritance and obtain the lucky chances of the myriad soul Tao, there were 3 paths to choose from. The first was to be like East Joe Jolly. If one seized 3 round platforms, they would naturally obtain approval and be able to directly enter the land of inheritance. The second path was the 3 great mountains in front of him. Each mountain represented a formidable test. Cultivators that crossed the 3 great mountains could also obtain the qualifications to enter the land of inheritance. As for the third path, Chinyu's complexion changed. He came to a sudden stop, his eyes tightly staring at the 3 great mountains. Astonishing fluctuations of aura were spreading out from within the 3 mountains. They were like invisible pillars of light that smashed into the skies above. In the blink of an eye, a vortex was opened up. As it spun, it emitted loud, rumbling sounds, its momentum astonishing to the extreme. But what was even more astonishing was that a flight of stairs stretched out from this vortex. It was pure white, as if it were made from pure jade, and it fell all the way to the top of the 3 mountains. A figure fluttered up and landed on the stairs. From afar, one could hear cries of alarm coming from the mouths of everyone. Chinyu looked up with rapt attention. As this figure became clearer, his complexion changed. It was him. Now, the one who landed on the stairs was Shang Lingwei. The third path was to release one's own aura. If one could obtain the approval of the myriad soul Tao, then the stone steps would descend, and one could directly enter the myriad soul Tao, just like what Shang Lingwei was doing right now. He had actually obtained the approval of the myriad soul Tao. As Qin Yu's heart shook, there was even more incredulity and a strange feeling in his heart. It had to be known that the goal of establishing the myriad soul Tao was to help humanity find a way to break through the limits of cultivation and thus end the threat of the abyss. But now, a powerful abyssal life form had actually obtained the approval of the myriad soul Tao and was sent into the land of inheritance in front of everyone's eyes. To put it bluntly, this was simply ridiculous. It seemed that what the stone pagoda said was true. There was a problem with the myriad soul Tao itself. This likely increased the risks that Chinyu would have to bear if he continued to stay here. Chinyu, you've finally taken this matter seriously. Let me tell you, you cannot stay in the myriad soul Tao any longer. You must immediately leave before the stone pagoda could finish speaking, Qin Yu cut off the connection between them once more. Shang Lingyue, who was stepping onto the jade stairs and walking towards the vortex, seemed to sense something and turned around to look at Qin Yu. Shang Lingyue was startled, as if he hadn't expected that they would meet again so soon. He paused for a moment and then revealed a faint smile. Qin Yu thought about what kind of reaction he should have right now. Soon, a gentle smile appeared on his face. The two of them looked at each other and smiled, as if they were reunited friends. But in truth, deep in their hearts, they wished that the other party could die right now. Of course, Qin Yu's desire was much stronger. Shang Lingyue only thought about it for a moment before giving up. In his opinion, personally killing his prey was the best result. Without a doubt, Qin Yu had already become one of the prey that he had to kill. Daring to kill a noble abyssal life form was a great crime that could not be forgiven no matter what. He turned around and walked away. Shang Lingyue's figure finally disappeared into the vortex. The stairway to the heavens also disappeared along with it. But unexpectedly, when Shang Lingyue stepped into the land of inheritance, the vortex in the sky didn't disappear. It continued to spin as if it had sensed a brewing will. At the location of the three mountains, the many followers gathered here all widened their eyes. After a moment of shock, their eyes brightened. Could it be that someone had obtained the recognition of the myriad soul path? After passing the test of the three mountains, one could enter the land of inheritance. This path was placed in front of them, but there were very few people that had the qualifications to pass it. If one could directly enter the land of inheritance, that would be an irresistible temptation for anyone. Qin Yu's expression suddenly became strange, because at this moment, he felt it will descend. There was no need for any explanation. He naturally understood that the vortex in the sky was waiting for him, as long as it was willing. The same jade stairway that took Shang Lingyue would descend from the vortex and send him into the land of inheritance. If he hadn't witnessed Shang Lingyue entering the vortex, Qin Yu would have accepted the call of this will without hesitation. After all, if he could step into the land of inheritance without any effort, that would naturally be the best. But with Shang Lingyue in front of him, forget it. He would rather spend more effort and pass the test of the three mountains. Otherwise, if he entered right after Shang Lingyue, who knew what would happen? It was best not to do anything that would bring about death. Qin Yu rejected the call of this will. It clearly paused for a moment, as if it had never encountered something like this before. But it soon retreated. Above the three mountains, the spinning vortex quickly disappeared. Everyone who had been looking up in anticipation was secretly disappointed. It seemed that it was just that the speed at which the vortex dissipated was a bit slower. It wasn't that someone had obtained the recognition. Of course, they didn't expect that someone would obtain the recognition, but ultimately reject the call of the vortex. And this person had already quietly arrived before the test of the three mountains. That's right, the test of the three mountains was the name given to the three mountains. Over the countless years, almost all followers that attempted to enter the land of inheritance had come here. They were either filled with confidence or filled with awe. But no matter what they thought, those that successfully passed the test of the three mountains and entered the land of inheritance were extremely rare. Stop looking. Those that can directly obtain the recognition of the myriad soul path and enter the land of inheritance are absolute geniuses. They aren't people we can compare to. That person seems to be Shang Lingyue, a master from the peach blossom spring. He is truly worthy of being a disciple of a holy land. He is truly fierce. Forget it. No matter how fierce others are, that's their problem. We should hurry up and think of a way to pass the test of the three mountains. Passing the test of the three mountains sounds easy, but how many people can actually do it? Filled with envy, jealousy, and hatred, the crowd retracted their envious gazes and turned their attention back to the three mountains in front of them. The three mountains were arranged in a zigzag shape. They towered into the clouds and were covered with lush vegetation. Just looking at them, one could faintly feel an invisible pressure. Qin Yu looked up several times and then looked away. After thinking for a moment, he passed through the sighing crowd and walked towards the first mountain. Another one that doesn't know the immensity of the heavens and earth. Humph humph. If he doesn't stay outside and adapt to the aura of the first mountain, he will at least be severely wounded. This fellow will soon escape in a sorry state. Chapter 10:12. What the East Zhou family valued so highly and what had changed East Zhou Jolly's fate was only a single spot to enter the myriad soul path. In order to obtain the inheritance, one needed to carefully select followers and pass through the myriad soul paths test before finally entering the land of inheritance. As for the Three Mountains trial, as long as one passed it, one would also be able to obtain the qualifications to enter the inheritance ground. Through a simple comparison, one could naturally tell just how high the difficulty of this trial was, and how high it would cause one to feel despair. The test of the first mountain had already begun the moment Qin Yu took his first step. To be more precise, this should be an invisible and intangible aura. It was incomparably strange and possessed an incomparably potent penetrating power. It could tear apart all defenses and finally invade a cultivator's body, causing them to lose control of their strength and causing a terrifying backlash. Qin Yu soon understood why he had heard those cultivators sneering and mocking him when he stepped onto the first mountain. As expected, the test of the Three Mountains wasn't easy to pass. Those people had stayed outside the first mountain, not daring to enter. They must have hoped that their strength could adapt to this strange aura as soon as possible. But at this time, before Qin Yu could mobilize his strength to resist the penetrating aura from the outside, within his soul space, the rising purple moon and blue sun began to tremble. The sun and moon force fields began to shake along with them. It was like a bubble wrapping around him. Although it seemed incomparably fragile, it actually possessed an unbelievable defensive power. The strange aura that flooded the entire range of the first mountain couldn't be broken through at all. It was completely isolated outside. Qin Yu moved around a little. As expected, he couldn't feel the invasion of this aura any longer. His complexion became strange. This should be considered cheating. After waiting for a while and seeing no movement, Qin Yu felt a little more at ease. It seemed that his method of cheating with his strength was allowed. If so, then everything was simple. At the very least, the first mountain beneath his feet couldn't affect him in the least. Qin Yu revealed a faint smile. He gathered his thoughts and followed the stone path beneath his feet, continuing upwards. Because he wasn't affected by the aura of the outside world, his speed was fast. He soon caught up to the cultivators who had entered the first mountain a step earlier. There was the sound of footsteps. Under a large tree on the side of the road, a cultivator who was cultivating with his eyes closed suddenly frowned. Then he opened his eyes. Someone else had caught up, and from the sound of his footsteps, it seemed to be very calm. This person should be a master. However, to his surprise, an unfamiliar face appeared in front of him. There seemed to be no information about this person in his memory. However, it didn't take long for the cultivator to stop paying attention to the man's appearance. Subconsciously, his eyes widened until they looked as if they were about to pop out of their sockets. Strolling leisurely in the courtyard, calm and unruffled, composed, a bunch of words popped up almost at the same time, making it difficult for him to breathe, as if his neck was being choked. That's right, this was Qin Yu's current posture. His steps were neither too fast nor too slow, as if he were walking down a tree-lined path. No, it wasn't as if he were, but as if he were walking down a tree-lined path. However, the most important thing was that this tree-lined path was none other than the first mountain of the myriad soul path's Three Mountains. Every time the 10,000 soul path was opened, thousands upon thousands of followers would arrive before the Three Mountains, but only a few would be able to clear the first mountain. Even he, who was publicly recognized as a master of the younger generation, was filled with confidence before he entered. But after arriving here, his chances of smoothly passing the first mountain had become infinitesimally small. Just as his faith was shaken and he was silently healing his wounds, He saw Qin Yu walking down the first mountain in such a manner. The impact on his heart could be imagined. Qin Yu could feel the gaze of the road examiner. He nodded to him and continued walking, soon vanishing from sight. He left just like this. He was still calm. Ah, my heart, it hurts so much. We are all men here, so why are you so outstanding? As he walked forwards, Qin Yu received far too many shocks. All the climbers he surpassed looked at him as if they were witnessing a legend. But in the current situation, it wasn't the time to keep a low profile. Shang Lingwei had already entered the land of inheritance a step ahead of him. Although Qin Yu didn't want to enter with him, he couldn't fall too far behind. After all, the reason he didn't make a move right now was likely because he couldn't wait to enter the land of inheritance. If he entered earlier, it would be best if he could find out the secrets of the myriad soul Dao before Shang Lingwei finished his own matters and grasped the method to unravel them. The closer he went to the summit, the stronger the invisible, penetrating aura became. Qin Yu could clearly feel the sun-moon force field emitting deep rumbling sounds when it was impacted, similar to the undulating waves of the ocean. Compared to when he first stepped onto the first mountain, its intensity had increased by more than 10 times. It was because of this that the closer he got to the summit, the more cultivators he encountered began to decrease at an astonishing rate. When he crossed halfway up the mountain and continued towards the summit, Qin Yu didn't encounter another cultivator. Just as Qin Yu thought he had reached the front, a figure finally appeared in front of him. At first glance, he subconsciously frowned, a look of surprise on his face. Before Qin Yu could take a closer look, this figure seemed to sense something and turn around. What a beautiful pair of eyes! The woman in front of him had a thin figure, and her facial features weren't considered exquisite. But when she added on those dark and spirited eyes, she seemed to come alive. A look of undisguised surprise flashed in her eyes, as if she were surprised that someone had managed to catch up to her progress. Thinking for a moment, she said, "This fellow Taoist that seems quite fierce. I would like to make a deal with you. I wonder if you would be willing?" The voice was very ordinary. It was the simple voice of a woman, but it had a warm texture to it that made one instinctively feel a sense of closeness. But why did she call him a fellow Taoist that seemed fierce? It sounded strange no matter how he thought about it. But right now, Qin Yu wasn't in the mood to think about these things. He couldn't help but furrow his eyebrows. After experiencing many things, he naturally knew that in this world, there was no such thing as a good impression without reason. In particular, after his cultivation had reached his current boundary and he had experienced all sorts of tempering, his heart had long since become incomparably powerful. It wouldn't be so easily touched. "Sorry, I'm in a hurry." Although this woman seemed harmless, and he didn't feel any malice from her, caution was a quality that any cultivator should abide by no matter where or when. Sensing the firmness and coldness in Qin Yu's words, the woman, standing high above, was startled. She immediately reacted and coughed several times. "This voice of mine is something I was born with. Teacher said that I had to cultivate it to a certain boundary before I could freely release it. I'm not trying to trick you." She seemed a bit anxious. Her face flushed red, and she waved her hand. Anxiety appeared in her pitch-black eyes. It was clear that the deal that Qin Yu had rejected was extremely important to her. This was a woman that didn't know how to hide her emotions. Although there were peerless and exquisite acting skills in this world, one could still clearly feel the fluctuations of emotions from the inside out. She really didn't seem to have any malice towards him. But Qin Yu wasn't lying. He was indeed in a hurry for time, and the reason was mentioned just now. So, he only glanced at her and then continued forwards without a word. He soon arrived at the woman's side. Without pausing, he walked past her and continued forwards. "Wait a moment. I can give you a reward, a very, very generous reward. I'm sure you will be satisfied. Moreover, my request isn't difficult at all. With your ability, you should be able to easily accomplish it." Unfortunately, her words clearly didn't move Qin Yu's heart. His figure didn't pause at all, and he soon disappeared into the forest. "Hey, that really is a precious reward. This is a treasure that I spent a great deal of effort to obtain from teacher. It can save a life in a critical moment. You? Why can't you take a look before you make a decision?" Her voice gradually faded away. There was a bit of unwillingness and also a bit of complaint, but there weren't any other negative emotions. Just as she bit her lips, thinking that she would definitely lose this time, she heard the sound of footsteps returning. She looked up to see that Chinyu had returned and was standing several meters away. "I'm really in a hurry, so if you want to make a deal, you had best show me your greatest sincerity." What changed his mind wasn't the woman's so-called helplessness. If he really wanted to be a good person, then in this cruel world, even if he had 100 lives, it still wouldn't be enough for others to kill him. The reason he returned was because Chinyu had heard her mention that she had a very precious treasure in her hands that could save a life in a critical moment. He didn't know why, but these words touched Chinyu's mind, stirring up ripples in his heart. With the sun and moon force field added to his body, he transcended the world. Although his cultivation couldn't be considered transcendent, he still had some transcendent attributes. Thus, Chinyu couldn't completely ignore the fluctuations in his mind. The woman's face lit up with joy. She hurriedly said, "Don't worry, I am the fairest person in the world. As long as you can help me, I will definitely give you the treasure." As she spoke, she flipped her hand and a walnut appeared in her palm. The skin was slightly white, and occasionally there were a few black spots mixed in, as if it had been dug out from a pile of rotten leaves not too long ago and hadn't been completely cleaned yet. "This is this walnut. Take a look first. If you're satisfied, then I will state my conditions." As she spoke, she reached out a hand and placed it in front of Chinyu. This caused him to reveal a look of surprise. After a brief pause, he reached out and took the walnut. This walnut looked ordinary, but the moment it fell into his hand, Chinyu could hear the explosive roars of millions of thunderbolts exploding in his ears. His consciousness was instantly pulled into a world of thunder. Endless bolts of lightning wildly tumbled about, as if they could destroy all. His first thought was that this was bad. He had been tricked by someone. Chinyu bitterly smiled. He had indeed been too careless. With a thought, he galvanized the sun and moon force field, and his consciousness instantly returned to his body. But to a cultivator, life and death were decided in an instant. When his consciousness was pulled into the world of thunder just now, it was more than enough for someone prepared to kill him several times over. But when he opened his eyes, he saw that the woman in front of him was still standing in the same place. Her eyes were wide, and she revealed an expression of admiration. Then she exclaimed in a similar tone, "You actually regained consciousness so quickly. How fierce!" I was stunned for a long time. Chinyu, should this be the point of focus? However, this also allowed Chinyu to relax a little. It seemed that this woman didn't have any ill intentions towards him. Otherwise, she definitely wouldn't have missed out on that opportunity just now. He looked down at the quiet walnut in his hand. As he recalled what he saw just now, his heart chilled. In a critical moment, if he could stimulate the power of thunder contained within this walnut, it would indeed have the effect of changing the situation. Chinyu took a deep breath and suppressed his thoughts. He said, "I'm satisfied with this item. Tell me your conditions." The woman smiled. She lifted a hand and pointed upwards. "I want you to bring me up the mountain." Chinyu frowned. "You want to pass the 3 mountains trial?" He could calmly deal with the first mountain by relying on the sun and moon force field. But he wasn't sure what the situation would be like on the second and third mountains. But it was impossible for a person's luck to be so good all the time. It was already difficult for him to rush through them alone. If he were to bring a burden along, Chinyu didn't have full confidence he could do so. The woman waved her hand again and again. No, I don't want to pass the 3 mountains trial. Otherwise, you just need to bring me to the summit of this mountain." Chinyu relaxed. If this was the case, then the difficulty would be much lower. But he didn't immediately agree. After a moment of silence, he said, "All right, that's great." The woman cheered. She lifted a hand and took out a silk ribbon. It was pure white and flawless, like flowing moonlight. "If you hold on to it, I can go up the mountain with you." Chinyu's thoughts stirred. He reached out and took one end of the silk ribbon. He was originally worried that the existence of the sun and moon force field would be discovered. But since she had her own methods, that was for the best. Let's go. He turned and walked away. As he tugged on the silk ribbon, he could feel an invisible pressure all around him. It was like the air had become thick and viscous, as if he had fallen into mud. Every step forwards required more strength. This was because the invisible aura that wrapped around Qin Yu and tried to drill into his body had suddenly risen several times over. As he thought, the Three Mountains trial wouldn't truly have no bottom line. It could tacitly allow Qin Yu to rely on his own strength to easily ascend a mountain, but it wouldn't allow such blatant cheating methods. Within his soul space, the purple moon and blue sun began to revolve at an even faster speed. With loud bangs, it was like a stone being struck against a leather drum. Although it wasn't intense, it was incomparably clear in his perception. It caused Qin Yu's ears to ring and his chest to feel heavy. It was clear that the invisible aura outside had impacted the sun and moon force field. It had surpassed a certain limit and was beginning to affect his body. Luckily, the feeling of discomfort wasn't too strong. After revolving his cultivation a little, his body relaxed. Qin Yu tugged on the silk ribbon. The woman behind him was like a kite being lifted up in the air, following him forwards. Looking at Qin Yu's back, he paused for a moment before composing himself once more. The woman let out a breath of relief, a relaxed look on her face. Luckily, this fellow Taoist was truly strong. He was actually able to pull her along as they moved through the first mountain. Otherwise, things would have been far more troublesome. But how did he do this? Looking at his cultivation, he could only be considered average at best, but he was actually able to pull her along. Blinking her eyes, the woman quietly reached out a hand. I'm warning you. Don't even think about probing me. Otherwise, the transaction will be nullified immediately. I'll accept the walnuts, and you can think of a way to climb up the mountain yourself. The woman blushed red, revealing embarrassment that she couldn't hide. She whispered, I'm sorry, I was just curious for a moment. I won't do it again. She actually admitted it. Qin Yu secretly shook his head. He considered himself experienced and knowledgeable, but even so, he wasn't able to see through this woman. Her actions were filled with innocence and immaturity, yet she was able to climb up to this point by herself. Whatever, they were just strangers that met by chance. Once he brought her to the top of the mountain, they would be even. There might not be a day they would meet again in the future, so there was no need to think too much about it. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.